Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. My name is Winnie Manganye. I work for the South African Local Government Association. I think most of you know this face because we have been engaging since the inception of the project. So my work is quite easy. Just to tell you what the project is about. Please accept my apology if you have seen this presentation. But again, there are those who have never seen it, and we thought it would make sense if we just give them a background, what is the project about? And then from there, I give you the purpose of why we are here today. So the project is implemented in partnership with 3 partners, which is SALGA, PARI, and Integrity Action. We received support from the European Commission in South Africa to implement the project. This is a 4-year project, which has a very long name. It is called Supporting Public Participation and Planning in Local Government towards a local government service delivery and accountability. The project started in February 2022, where we started with, getting to know one another as the 3 partners, signing an MOU between the partners, and also sharing responsibilities. So it is a 4-year project. Definitely it's going to end in 2026. We are hoping that you will continue with the work that we have started. The activities of the project, what is core in this project is public participation in the area of water and sanitation. And the approach here, it uses quite a lot of action research. Hence, we are here today to give you feedback in relation to the action research that we did in the past few months. The project has aims, and it aims to achieve a more responsive and accountable local government so that we can deepen the democracy that we have in the country. It aims to enhance participation of local communities in the IDP processes. We all know IDP process can be a daunting exercise. Sometimes it can be a rent-a-crowd, I'm sorry to say that, but in other municipalities it does happen, in others it doesn't, in others it's just for compliance purposes, but Kate is going to elaborate on that. To improve planning and oversight, definitely we need to plan better as municipalities. And these are the goals of the project: to strengthen our IDP process by improving participations of citizens. So what we are saying here is citizens need to have ownership of the plans that are happening in the municipalities, and they must hold their municipalities accountable. But also as municipalities, whatever we plan, it has to be informed by the needs of those that we are servicing. Another goal is to enhance local government service delivery and accountability, to contribute to empowered citizenry and capable and responsive public official, and also to contribute to internal municipal systems that ensure proper alignment of development goal with internal planning and performance management. These are the implementing partners. We have Integrity Action, we have SALGA, we have PARI. In this instance, PARI is the lead organization supported by SALGA and Integrity Action. And each partner has a role. And these are the roles that have been named below. So PARI is the lead partner, very strong in action research. Hence, we have Kate, who is leading in that role. SALGA, our role, stakeholder relation, hence you are here today, and a little bit of action research. While Integrity Action, they are very good in citizen-based monitoring, of which we are also going to contact you again so that you can assist us in achieving that particular element of the project. This is the rationale. I'm not going to say much on this. You know the challenges that we are facing. Hence, we decided to have this project. So we definitely need to strengthen our IDP process. We need to strengthen our public participation and ensure that planning and oversight is done so that we can achieve the roles of the municipality. Project action, it is in twofold. There's the national level intervention and the local level intervention. I think you will understand as we go on with the program why we are talking about the national level intervention. Here we are saying the advocacy part should be done at a much higher level where we include all those national departments so that to rationalize the overarching regulatory system, because they are the custodians of our regulations and our policies, to advocate for greater professionalization and capacity building. And also we feel that at that level, we'll be able to disseminate the lessons, tools, and platform, and also to encourage the adoption of new ways of working between local residents and municipalities. Hence, you will hear when Girish is talking about the terms of reference for the reference group, you will understand why we are talking about the national level intervention. So Girish is going to elaborate on that further. In terms of the local level intervention, that's where then we are implementing the project in the 12 municipalities. Here, we're going to investigate the capacity of the residents in terms of engaging in planning processes and undertaking citizen-based monitoring. We are also going to co-produce, so we are not saying us as the implementing partners are going to produce the tools. We will co-produce these tools with our municipalities, with our communities as well. So there'll be a lot of engagement as we produce these tools. We will therefore investigate and co-produce tools and platforms to enhance IDP process. And then we will then take these tools that have been developed and pilot them into 2 annual cycles of the IDP process. So this is the program design. The inception phase is what I spoke about to say, as the implementing partners, we had to formalize the partnership. We had to do stakeholder analysis. We had to develop this program design. And then we went further late last year where we conducted action research, but we didn't just start by conducting research. We had to develop questionnaires. We had to engage our municipalities and introduce the project. And I am so grateful that all the 12 municipalities were keen in participating in this project. And also they've ensured that they sign letters of commitment to say, definitely we want to be part of this work that is being done. So now, why on the action research, we are at a stage where we have developed a report on the findings of what transpired. So we are now going to, today we are going to present those findings. And then after that, you have a chance to engage with the findings, make further inputs, and then we will go back and engage with communities now to say, what are communities saying? So where we will be deep diving in terms of the analysis of this research, and then we will went further and develop a toolbox. In that toolbox, we will have different guidelines, frameworks, and all form of support that will be in the toolbox so that it assists you based on the outcome of the research, of course. And then from there, we will then start a process of implementing the toolbox. But in that process, we will determine a gap analysis. We'll try and come up with the resolution for those gaps that have been identified. And then we will go to stage 5, where we now monitor and evaluate the program. But in terms of monitoring and evaluation the program, it's not just us who will do that, because we cannot be the player and the referee at the same time. The funder will also do their part in terms of monitoring the project and evaluating the project. And this is going to be done by an independent service provider who may come to you and find out if we are doing what we said we will do. So we also appeal for your support in that. If you are called and say they want to engage with you, please avail yourself. But we will tell you in time when they come. And then we are also going to do change management, which will assist us in doing things better. So we don't need to repeat the same mistake again and again. And then we will disseminate all the tools that have been developed and all the knowledge that has been developed. So we've passed year one, as I indicated. We are now in year two. So these are the timelines of the project. So I don't need to dwell on that, but the presentation is going to be shared with you. And then these are the project beneficiaries. We've got the residents in the 12 municipalities. We've got the 12 municipalities. And we also have units within national departments like your COMPACT and National Treasury, who are the direct beneficiaries of the project. And then these are the municipalities that are participating in the project, you know yourself, in the 12 provinces. Sorry about that, colleagues. The one online, they can't see the presentation, so we are trying to share the presentation with them as well. The next slide, please. Okay, this is the project structure. We've got the executive project steering committee, where the heads of the department of the organization are members of that structure. We've got the extended project steering committee, where all the implementing partners together with the SALGA provincial personnel are part of that steering committee. We have the project operation ops committee, but from the inception of the project, we only managed to form one group, which is the research task team in that operating committee. And then we have the reference group, where you will understand now why we have the reference group. That's where Mr. Gerish is going to present about on the terms of reference for this reference group, which is supposed to consist of us as a whole, together with the national departments, COCTA and National Treasury and other departments. That's where we will present the implementation of the project. So they will monitor the project, and then after that, they will then ensure that the outcome of what has come out of COMPACT is emulated in other in their areas and other departments and other municipalities. And then at a community level, we're also going to have coordinating bodies, where we will have the participating municipal representatives with their communities and us as the project operating committee. Why we are here today? You know, we've had phase one of the action research. We've conducted action research. We've presented the outcome of the action research to the individual municipalities. We've started that process, I think, a few months ago. We've also presented the outcome to the provinces as well. Why we did this? We felt that it is only fair to present the outcome to the individual municipalities so that they understand where they are, so that they can make inputs into the document, so that they can also, I don't know the correct name, but without naming and shaming, but they know where they are and they know where to improve as municipalities. And fortunately, all those reports and presentation were accepted by municipalities. There were municipalities who were saying, it is indeed a true reflection, whether negative or positive, we accept that, and we are planning to improve. And we were so, I think I wouldn't say lucky, but we were so privileged. In one of the municipalities, they said, since you came last year, between that time and this, we've managed to improve. This is where we are. So to us, that was really an achievement. So today we have a stakeholder engagement so that now we can present the overall results of the action research. That's why we are here today. And then the aim of today's session is to bring all of you together with the participating municipalities and other stakeholders to reflect on the overarching findings of phase 1 of the action research, with a particular focus on the implications of the relevant recommendation for each stakeholder. And then these are the objectives of today's engagement: to provide a platform for robust engagement on the findings from the action research which was conducted in phase 1, to share the recommendation and best practices of phase 1, to solicit inputs from all of you into the development and the design of the toolbox, of which Mr. Girish is going to talk about, to present the draft terms of reference of the project reference committee, of which I spoke about, which is the first step towards the initial advocacy work with all the stakeholders, such as the national departments and other stakeholders, where we are hoping that they will disseminate, there will be dissemination of research findings, lessons, practice notes, tools to all stakeholders nationally through different networks. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mamuni. We appreciate that. That was the purpose for today. Why are we here? But it's also important to know who is here, right? So for those who are attending virtually, it's very unfortunate that I cannot see your names. But for those who are in this place, or I could call it an arena if you allow me, if you look at your fact sheet, I think everyone has it in their table. There's about 12 municipalities that are written there, but I think today we have about 10 of them. I would like to sort of go province by province to sort of call, and hopefully you would acknowledge yourselves that you're here. So the first one would be from the Free State, Machabeng, Tswelopele. From KZN, it's Tswelopele. Thank you very much, sir. From KZN, it's Newcastle. Thank you. Tuesday was not able to be here because of various reasons. I'll move on to the Northwest. Moses Kotane. Thank you, sir. JP Marks. Thank you. Western Cape, Ortswarren, Württemberg. Thank you. The Eastern Cape, Blue Crane. I'm assuming Blue Crane is in the virtual meeting. We'll move on to Khuka. Sorry, I apologize for butchering your name. Thank you very much, sir, for acknowledging yourselves. And last but not least, Northern Cape, which is Soplati, and Mtanjeni, which is unfortunately not here. And would also like to acknowledge some of the civil society organizations such as Kagiso Trust and Action for Accountability. I will not say them all, and also some of the researchers who did a good job in making this all happen. Thank you very much. Without wasting much of your time, rather, I will move on to the next item. As you can see in the agenda, it's called presentations on the research findings. So for this item, we'll be having Ms. Kate Tissington of PARI. So she's a senior researcher at PARI and for the COMPACT project, and has conducted research on housing, water services, informal settlements, local government, urban governance, and law in South Africa. Fun fact is that she formed part of the COMPACT research team that visited the 12 respective communities between October and November 2022. And today, as I've pointed out earlier, she'll be rendering a presentation on the findings report on action research at the various municipalities. Without any further ado, I'd like to give you the mic and please do your thing.
No, thanks, Jabu, and welcome everyone to today's meeting. Am I able to, are you gonna press for me or can I? Okay, all right. Go for it. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can go to the next slide. Or, okay. Winnie's already told you the full name of the project. So just to say that this is sort of the basis on which we conducted the action research. We've already gone through the partner municipalities, so I'm not going to go through them. You can move. Yeah, so just to sort of refresh a little bit on what we did in terms of the action research. Last year, around October to December, the research team visited the 12 partner municipalities. What we did is we, together with the municipalities and the SALGA provincial offices, we identified key people in each municipality to be interviewed. So there was a process of identifying people, and when we got to the municipalities, we were able to talk to all of the people who were identified, and that was across the municipalities. It was mayors, speakers, municipal managers, ward councillors, some PR councillors, senior managers, municipal officials, and ward committee members. The research that we did was qualitative research. So what we did was we developed an interview guide, which was sort of like forming the basis of a conversation that we had with our respondents. So it was really just a guide to have a conversation, and we got some really rich information from those interviews. All of our interviews were recorded, and all the respondents signed a consent form, which basically guaranteed their anonymity. So in the report and any other publications, we undertook not to actually identify people by name. And the idea behind that was that people could speak as honestly and openly as possible about what was going on in the municipalities. So we did individual interviews, one-on-one interviews, as well as focus group interviews. That was mainly with ward committee members and councillors, where there were quite big groups, but also with some officials as well. These are just some photos from from all of the trips. You'll see, maybe you can spot yourself in there. Yeah, we had a really great turnout at all the municipalities, and we're very warmly welcomed. So thanks for everyone who participated. In terms of how many people were interviewed, across the 12 municipalities, we interviewed 373 people. So it's obviously quite a lot of people who we managed to speak to. Interviews were conducted mainly in English, but there was also some done in Afrikaans, isiXhosa, Setswana, Sesotho, and isiZulu, and those were translated afterwards. What we've been busy with for a lot of this year is doing analysis of all the interviews. So we transcribed the interviews from the recordings and wrote up notes. And what we really wanted to do in the reports was to focus on what respondents told the research team. So you'll see a lot of in the report, and just to say, the actual consolidated report will be circulated after this. I think you should all have a copy of the executive summary though. So it's a lot of quotes in the report, and we wanted to include the voices as much as possible of people who we interviewed, obviously without compromising confidentiality. So what we've been developing is 12 municipal reports, one per municipality. Winnie's already spoken about this. We've been through a process of providing feedback to the municipalities on the reports, sharing the findings. And then also what we've developed is what we call the consolidated technical findings report. and that has the research findings across all 12 municipalities. This is what the report structure looks like, just so you can get a sense of it. It's based on the sort of the municipal reports that we did. There's an introduction where we deal with sort of the background, context, the purpose, and then we talk about the methodology. There's a short legislative and policy framework, and then the bulk of the report is the research findings. And you'll see that we've broken down the research findings into 5, or actually 6, sorry, the numbering's wrong, 6 thematic areas. There's also a section that looks at proposed areas of action and recommendations, a short conclusion, and then in the annexure is a more detailed legislative and policy framework. So we've put that at the end. You can skip this. This is just some of the legislation and policy that we've covered. So in terms of the findings, the first sort of thematic area in terms of the findings is around the IDP public participation process. And something that we speak about in the beginning of the report is sort of high level perceptions of the IDP process. And there was a lot of interesting information that came up from our respondents about how they perceive the IDP process in terms of how they think it's happening. And unfortunately, across the municipalities, and I would say most of the municipalities, there is a sense that the IDP process is really happening just in terms of being a compliance exercise. And that came up from respondents. So that's something that people are acknowledging is happening in municipalities. Compliance or tick box exercise is how people describe it. So there's a sense in a lot of cases that it is being done just for the sake of being done and not so much for impact, which is what people told us. Although there are municipalities that have prioritized participation. So there's municipalities that have said, we're going to, and there's political will there around prioritizing participation. And their situation is a little bit different. So it's a mixed bag in terms of sort of how participation is happening. In terms of the actual practices of public participation, there's a section that deals with all of these process plan, advertising, transport, logistics, timing, structure of meetings, etc. So we go into quite a lot of detail describing some of the practices of participation in municipalities. And we think that's quite important because the how of participation is sometimes sort of neglected in terms of how we talk about participation. So what we really wanted to do is to speak a bit about that. And in terms of things like the process plans, we were told that, I mean, they are in place in municipalities, but municipalities are often struggling to stick to process plans for various reasons. So there are sort of challenges with actual the planning of participation in municipalities. In terms of advertising, we were told about a range of methods that are being used, and municipalities are using a lot of the similar methods of advertising. Although there are some challenges in terms of that with funding. So obviously some municipalities are able to do more things like advertise in newspapers or print pamphlets, whereas some other municipalities just don't have the funding to do that. Something that we heard in all of the municipalities is that loud hailing is happening, and there's sort of almost the predominant method of advertising public participation meetings. But we also heard that there's some challenges around that, and people told us in some municipalities that, you know, it's happening very late notice, like the day before or 2 days before meetings. So there were just some challenges in terms of the organization of meetings, which is in the report. Another big challenge which a lot of municipalities are facing, especially the rural municipalities, is around transport to meetings. So you've got some municipalities that are really geographically dispersed with a lot of farms or other areas. And so there are challenges with trying to get transport for people. And that's something that obviously costs a lot of money, takes a lot of organizing. Some municipalities aren't really challenged with this at all. But some are finding that this is a big challenge when it comes to participation. Then there's some challenges around timing of meetings. So when's the best time to have an IDP meeting? A lot of municipalities have been struggling with this question. And, you know, people told us various things about how they had been doing meetings in the day, but then they shifted to the evening, or they shifted to Saturday mornings. So there's a whole range of different ways in which the timing of meetings is happening. And I think it is a tricky one get right, but municipalities are trying, I think, to do that. And then in terms of the structure of meetings, we heard a lot about how meetings are structured and how different meetings are structured in terms of who runs meetings, who's the sort of custodian of the meetings, who's doing welcomes, who's doing presentations. So that's differing quite a lot across municipalities in terms of how meetings are being structured. Moving on to attendance, this is something where the picture was quite grim in terms of attendance of meetings. So we were told in a lot of meetings, I'd say a lot of municipalities, I'd say most municipalities, that attendance has really been declining a lot in over the years in municipalities. And people give various reasons for this. Sort of the main one is that there's just fatigue by residents and communities to attend meetings. So there's a sense that there's just empty promises made year in, year out, and people just don't feel like there's any use to go to meetings. We were told, yeah, poor attendance. Obviously within municipalities, this differs. So you'll find that in some wards, there'll be good attendance. And we were told that in a number of cases, but in other cases, there's just really bad attendance. There's a sense that, yeah, communities have lost interest in the IDP process over the years. What we were told as well, though, is that at meetings, those who do attend, there are a lot of women who are attending meetings, which is obviously good. And also issues around timing of meetings to be able to allow women to come and attend meetings is important. We also told that a lot of elderly residents are attending meetings as well, which was interesting. Something which we did hear a lot as well is that unfortunately young people are not attending meetings. And this is something that came up, I think, across all of the municipalities, is that there's really poor youth attendance at IDP meetings. And this is, again, really around sort of loss of morale and a sense that these meetings don't really have a purpose. They're not speaking to the youth. They're not dealing with the issues that are facing young people, which are issues around unemployment, lack of job opportunities, lack of sort of like recreational facilities. So those kinds of things are what young people are interested in, bursaries, education opportunities. So, you know, unless those meetings are dealing with some of that, there's a sense that young people aren't that interested. Although we were also told that when people do attend meetings, they are very engaged. And a lot of people repeatedly told us how important it is to have young people at these meetings. So that is a really important area, I think, going forward in terms of how to get young people more involved. And there are municipalities who are going to high schools and doing more outreach to young people. So to take that sort of example from them and see what are some of the ways to do that. In terms of the quality of participation, something that came up a lot is that IDP meetings are complaint sessions. That's something that we heard over and over again, is that actually it's and I think it's in the absence of other meetings that are public meetings where people are able to talk about service delivery concerns. The IDP meetings have sort of become about complaints, unfortunately. And this is something that came up a lot. There's also a sense that residents are sort of listening, but aren't really able to actively participate. And there's also a perception that needs are just not being taken into account when they are expressed in these meetings. Another challenge which we were told about is sort of the lack of quality information and data and sort of insights that are presented at meetings. So there's a sense that communities and residents don't really have the kind of information, or at least it's not packaged in the way that is as useful to them to be able to engage as it could be. There are municipalities that are trying to make these sessions more interactive. So there's some good practice that we heard about in terms of trying to engage citizens more in this kind of process. So that's good to hear. Then just the last issue is around civic, on the slide before was around civic education. That's fine. So that came up a lot across all the municipalities, the need for civic education for communities and residents around public participation. So there's a sense that people don't really know about the IDP process, and that actually there does need to be more education for communities around the IDP, and is something I think we want forward, but it's definitely a queue. And then related to that is also the need for more municipal training on the IDP. So that came up as well, is that there actually needs to be training as well for councillors, ward committee members, and that often in municipalities, there isn't enough of an understanding, even though it does get addressed some induction workshops that take, that there actually could be more engagement, information shared around the IDP for actual municipal employees. Something that we heard a lot about, which I think was interesting to us because it seems to be something that happens quite differently across the municipalities, is the attendance of municipal staff at IDP meetings. So this came up over and over again, the need for municipal staff, for officials, for senior managers to be present at meetings, to be able to give report backs. And it's happening in a lot of municipalities, and it was really refreshing to hear how involved the staff are. But there are some municipalities where it's not happening and where there was a sense that really communities particularly really want to hear from officials in municipalities. There's a sense that they are sort of the experts on service delivery issues, and there's a sense that their voices are important to be heard and to be engaged with communities. So not to say that you know, politicians shouldn't be, the councillors shouldn't be in these meetings, but that there was a sense that there should also be a big role for the administration in these meetings in terms of presenting and providing feedback. So some of the municipalities that we work with have areas that are under traditional leaders, and that's the role of traditional leaders is something we also talk about in the report a bit. And it seems like in those municipalities, it is quite a good relationship that the municipality has with traditional leaders, and that they do play an important role in terms of community participation. So in terms of facilitating communities to be attending meetings. Involvement of civil society is something that came up a lot as well, and it seems like it's not happening as much as it should in municipalities. So in some municipalities, we were told that NGOs are quite involved and engaged, but in other municipalities, people told us that actually, yeah, it's not something that's happening, and there needs to be more engagement with civil society in those municipalities. Involvement of sector departments seems to be a challenge across municipalities to get sector departments to attend meetings. And there was a sense from municipalities that when sector departments do come to meetings and do present on other projects, on things that are obviously not necessarily the mandate of municipalities, that this is really welcome by municipalities, but that it's a challenge to get provincial and national departments to attend meetings, not just IDP meetings, just meetings in general, public meetings that are dealing with issues. And then finally, just talking about the use of ICT, something some municipalities have embraced, but also a lot of municipalities are struggling with ICT, and that's really to do with lack of capacity and lack of funding. But there's an acknowledgement that there are more things that can be done with ICT in terms of the IDP process, but there's just challenges. A lot of municipalities just don't have the staff to be able to do this. Then coming on to ward committees. In terms of the functionality of ward committees, we were told that there's a sort of a mixed bag in terms of ward committees in municipalities. So we were told generally that some are functional, some are not functional. That's sort of what we got back. In some municipalities, there really is a very functional ward committee system working, and a lot of emphasis is placed on ward committees. But in some municipalities, they really just are not functioning. Which is a pity because they're an important institution in municipalities for public participation. When we talk about the role of ward committee members, I think what was highlighted a lot in the interviews was the importance of ward committee members and ward committees in municipalities. So that came up a lot, and the role that they play and should be playing as the sort of link between the municipality and communities. But along with that importance came quite a deep sense of frustration by ward committee members about how they are viewed in the municipality and how they sort of maybe are not as supported as much as they could be in the municipality. There's a sense often that they're not really taken seriously. And that's obviously a pity because they can play a really important role. In terms of reporting, we were told that in municipalities, reporting is happening. So you have ward committee members who are sort of developing reports. There's normally a template and are engaging with the office of the speaker and the councillor in terms of what's happening in the wards. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like in most municipalities, much is being done with those reports. So it's sort of seen as being a bit of a fruitless exercise by ward committee members. They're doing this every month, and there's also perception that they're doing it just to get their stipends in some cases. And obviously there are challenges in terms of municipalities or ward committee members actually doing work. But it seems mostly that there's also just frustration around just not getting any feedback from the municipality after reporting is happening. Some municipalities have actually, though, instituted really interesting models of reporting for ward committee members. So things like action sheets and reporting to that it gets escalated within the municipality to portfolio committees is something which we heard about, which is quite interesting. So there's a sense that the reports in the municipalities are actually really taken seriously and are tabled in political structures in the municipality. And that seems to be working quite well and is something that could maybe be looked at across other municipalities as well. Just a word on meetings. It seems that meetings are not happening a lot of times, ward committee meetings or public meetings. So we were told a lot by interviewees that the councillors are not calling meetings, that ward committees are not being constituted as they should every month. And there's a sense that they want this to happen, but it's difficult to sometimes get this going. So the Office of the Speaker is obviously a really important institution in terms of sort of managing and monitoring this. And we feel like, yeah, the Office of the Speaker, it's difficult for them often to discipline ward councillors around this, but there is a need for sort of more oversight around meetings taking place in municipalities. In terms of resource support, something that came up over and over again committee is the issue of the stipend. So there's no remuneration for ward committee members, but they do get out-of-pocket expenses, which most people refer to as a stipend. The stipends normally range from sort of, I think most municipalities, it's sort of between 1,000 Rand and 1,500 Rand. With most of them, I think, are Rand. In one municipality, 500 Rand. And we were told by ward committee members that there just isn't enough to sustain them in term, not because obviously it's sort of not supposed to be a full-time position, just in terms of what it's supposed to be used for, which is like data and transport expenses. It's just not enough, and airtime, it's just not enough to be able to cover that. So there are challenges with that. Things like sort of name badges, uniforms, access to stationery, books, all of that, laptops came up as well. But just some of those sort of tools of the trade, ward committee members spoke about not having. And some do have, some municipalities are providing that, and there's sort of a more sense of professionalization in a way of ward committees. But in a lot of municipalities, just really nothing that's provided. So there's a sense of just needing there to be more recognition and respect of ward committee members. Something that came up repeatedly was around training and capacity building. So this is something that ward committee members really want. They want more training, they want more skills development, they want more capacity building. They feel like they don't know enough. Like, so while there is induction that happens and SALGA is involved in some of that and the provincial government is involved in some of that. So while there are induction training that take place for ward committee members, they feel like this needs to be something that's ongoing, and it needs to be sort of assistance with various things. So practical things like report writing, how the municipality works, information about the legislation, and then information as well that is related to their portfolios. So ward committee members each have sort of different portfolios that they get assigned. And there's a sense that they're sort of assigned these portfolios, but there's not enough assistance in terms of actually that means and training and education information on their portfolios. In terms of relationship with councillors and administration, this is obviously something that differs quite a lot across the municipalities. We heard report of really good relationships between councillors and ward committees. So it seems that there are places where these relationships are working, where there's a really conducive environment for ward committees to function. But we've also heard that situations with ward committees where there's not a good relationship with their councillors. And that's where I guess the office of the speaker comes in, but it's something which is clear challenge in some municipalities. There's often not the best relationship of ward committee members with the administration in municipalities. There's a sense that they're not really taken seriously by the administration, and some animosity, especially around dealing with service delivery complaints. So that's sort of a relationship that I think needs to be improved in municipalities. Something that really came up a lot was the need for better communication, which I'm going to talk about later, but the need for regular back and updates to ward committee members, and sort of a flow of information between ward committee members, councillors, and the administration. Finally, just to have a word about the politicization of ward committees. So this is something that came up again and again, was the challenge of committees sort of becoming a space of political contestation in a lot of municipalities. So in some municipalities, there's a lot of challenges with ward committees and with ward committee members from different political parties, and just inability for people to work together on ward committees. It doesn't seem like that's necessarily the bulk of ward committees, but it is obviously a challenge facing some municipalities. And this is something that starts sort of from the beginning of their term. Some municipalities says that it said that it improves over time, that it was quite intense in the beginning, and then it seems to get better, and there's a sort of a more conducive working relationship that happens over time. But yeah, it's something that was flagged quite a bit. Next slide. In terms of communication in municipalities, I've put there crisis of communication because that is something that we heard over and over again. I mean, it's something which we weren't really expecting to hear that much about, but it was something that was spoken about in every single municipality by almost every single person that we interviewed. This came up, the issue of communication. And this is dealing with internal communication within municipalities, but also communication with residents and communities. So there's clearly major challenges with internal communication in some municipalities. And like I said, this is often because there's just maybe not even a person, one comms person in a municipality. So it's an issue of capacity, but it's also an issue in terms of just where political leadership and the administration places on communication. So in some municipalities, we were told like it's just not something that's prioritized, but it's really something that needs to be worked on. In terms of communication with residents and communities, this is something which seems to be a struggle for municipalities, is how to talk to residents and communities. A lot of people we spoke to felt like municipalities are talking down to residents and communities. So the way in which municipalities are communicating is important, but also just in some cases, complete lack of communication we were told is happening in some municipalities. So there's just no communication happening. Yes, there might be some meetings here and there, but in terms of actual communication, it's really just not happening. So, in municipalities, we were told people are just really wanting to sort of like feedback, constant feedback, information, even if it's not necessarily a good story, just to rather have the truth. That was what came up a lot, was just like, can the municipality be honest with us? Can we just have the truth? And it's obviously difficult. And in terms of at IDP meetings, having municipal officials come, what we were told by some officials is that they really don't want to go to those meetings because they get shouted at. So in terms of how those meetings are structured and sort of issues around conflict resolution, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's coming up from the interviewees, which I think are challenges facing municipalities. Just a word on sort of customer care and ICT. In some municipalities, customer care is obviously almost the only way in which residents are engaging with the municipality, but there's various levels to which customer care is happening across municipalities. Some municipalities have really good electronic systems that are working. Some municipalities literally have one book in one office that you go and write in. So there's huge discrepancies in terms of how these systems are being implemented in municipalities. Capacity is a challenge, definitely. In a lot of municipalities, you have one person who's doing the job of at least 3 people. And that's obviously issues of funding available, but also an issue of just what positions are prioritized in the municipality, I think as well. In terms of, yeah, you can skip the slide. Something we talk a little bit about as well is operational planning, and something which we asked around is the alignment of the IDP, the SDBIP, and the budget. And there's clearly a lot of challenges facing municipalities in aligning these in these documents. So in some municipalities, we were told, no, there's perfect alignment between them. In others, we were told, we know they're supposed to be aligned, but they're not really aligned. So a big challenge is also just lack of funding for projects. So things get put into the IDP, and a lot of people did mention the IDP as being a wish list. But yeah, just challenges with actually aligning all of these documents. And the planning happening in sort of silos and municipalities. Coordination between departments is another challenge that people spoke about a lot as well. So just a lack of synergy between departments, between the IDP department and sort of other line departments. And just a sense that there's a lot of working in silos happening, and we know this, and I'm preaching to the converted here. I think everyone knows this, but it's something that was spoken about a lot by respondents. And then also just because our focus is a little bit more on water and sanitation, which was mentioned before, we spoke to quite a lot of people from like technical and infrastructure departments. And they told us as well that like in terms of water services development plans and planning around water and sanitation, that's quite a big challenge in municipalities and isn't happening as it should be, and could be a really important tool, but it's just something which maybe they got consultants, but they didn't do a good job. We heard that quite a lot, that money was being spent on consultants for this kind of work, and it just wasn't happening or it wasn't useful. And then something that also was raised a lot was underspending of funds in municipalities. So this is obviously a cause for quite a lot of concern, that municipalities are just not able to spend money, and money has been given back to National Treasury. And you can imagine the kind of anger this raises in definitely ward committee members who know this is happening, and communities as well, that money is available but isn't being spent. And there's a number of reasons for underspending. People told us, lack of proper planning is one of the biggest ones. Lack of performance management, so things not going well but never being picked up until the last minute. So projects just getting derailed and not enough sort of focus on that. And just poor communication as well. So sometimes projects being stopped by community members for various reasons because there hasn't been proper communication with them around job opportunities and other issues as well. Then just to talk a little bit about performance management, we also found that there were quite a lot of challenges of linkages between the IDP, SDBIP, and performance management. So a lot of municipalities are really struggling with performance management. That's what we heard. So we were told that in some cases it's on paper, but it's just really not actually happening. In some cases, we were told, what is performance management? What are you talking about? And it was a joke, but it was to basically say, it's not happening. It's not happening in municipalities at all. Different municipalities have different PMS systems in place. Some are quite rudimentary, some are more are electronic and more linked into like the financial system of the municipality. So there's quite a lot of difference in terms of what kind of systems are actually in place in municipalities. In terms of KPIs, this is something where a lot of municipalities are struggling to develop their KPIs, and it's something where some municipalities have put a lot of emphasis on and are quite advanced in terms of their KPIs, and really have put thought into it and feel like they have good KPIs and are happy. And some municipalities just feel like, and this is not just coming, this is coming from municipal managers who will admit that this is the problem. So they will say that we need a lot of help around this. So there are challenges with developing smart KPIs. There's also issues between how to manage this in-house and service providers. So municipalities who manage this in-house are really proud of the fact that they're doing that and not using service providers. But it is clearly a challenge, and I think with KPIs that come from national government as well, there's a sense that sort of KPIs from national government are not always really speaking to what are the issues in municipalities. So there's a sense that sometimes the KPIs are too simple, put it that way, and are not really actually monitoring what needs to be monitored. So that came up a little bit as well, is that the KPIs are, in terms of when it comes to auditing them, are a challenge for municipalities. So that's something we heard quite a lot about. Community monitoring of performance is really not happening in municipalities, although there is an acknowledgement that it is something that should be happening more. So communities monitoring performance is something which I think is really interesting, and is something which is maybe quite difficult to do, but it's something which a lot of people said would be really great to have happening. And this is from municipal managers all the way down to ward committee members, is that actually this would be something which would benefit the municipality quite a lot. And then finally, just a word on consequent management. So this was talked about a lot. Lack of accountability in municipalities was spoken about a lot. Challenges with disciplining officials was spoken about by all municipalities who are facing really protracted processes around this. So when there is an attempt to try to actually institute consequence management in municipalities, it's difficult. It's a really difficult process. And I think it seems like municipalities are really struggling with it, the ones that are trying to actually do it. But a lot of people mentioned just lack of accountability from the top to the bottom in municipalities. So from political leadership to senior managers all the way down as well, there are challenges definitely with accountability in municipalities. Finally, something which we sort of came up as a result of the research, that people were talking a lot about issues that relate to what we call the political administrative interface. And that's sort of how, in a nutshell, it's sort of how councillors and administration work together and the way in which they work. And we found that in a lot of municipalities, there's a lot of animosity between councillors and the administration. So people would say there's an us versus them mentality, and we'll speak about it in terms of that. And people were very honest about it, and you could pick it up as well in interviews that there was that kind of animosity. In some municipalities, it's not the case, though. There is a much better working relationship between councillors and members of the administration. But there's a lot of blurred lines in terms of what you can do and can't do, in terms of politicians sort of interfering or intervening in work of the officials. It's blurry in a lot of cases. And respondents told us that they're not always sure what's right or what's not right in terms of this. And then just finally, just to say that in a lot of the well, not a lot, but in some of the municipalities, there are coalition governments, and that just presents a lot of challenges. We heard from municipalities who are in coalition governments that, you know, there's challenges with just like a lack of shared vision, with people coming in and just wanting to completely shift in terms of what the administration's been doing. So there is, you know, political infighting is happening. So there are definitely challenges with disruptions around coalition governments, but it's inevitable, it's happening. So how to deal with that, I think, is something we also need to think about going forward. Oh. Okay, so just to quickly, and I'm sure I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go through this unfortunately quite quickly. These are quite high level proposed areas of action and recommendations. So like has been mentioned before, in this project, we really focused on trying to co-produce, co-create tools and interventions with municipalities. So ideas to sort of come up with solutions together. So this is, I would say, is more of like a starting point, and this is some things that have come up from the findings that we've identified as a sort of starting point for a discussion on what can actually be done in terms of these issues. So the first is that, you know, there's a need to establish a culture of public participation in municipalities. So while this starts with legislative compliance, and I think, you know, municipalities are complying with the legislation, which is obviously good. It is happening. But, you know, in terms of actual communities participating meaningfully, that's happening less so. So trying to actually focus energy and efforts in municipalities on this is important. The issues around information, data, and insights to be able to actually participate in a deliberative process. this is something we think is really important as well, that the information that is required to actually have residents participating isn't really being presented or given. Yes, information is being presented, but it's often not done in a way that actually can be useful for residents to engage. So that's something we feel like in terms of determining priorities and needs. I mean, I haven't spoken about the needs analysis, but there's a sense that in being able to do kind of a needs analysis at community level, there needs to be more information that's given to municipalities, to communities by municipalities. Something that came up a lot was that the IDP process needs to be depoliticized, which I think can sound a bit strange, but there is a sense that it's very politicized at the moment, the IDP process, and that it's actually something that needs to be dealt with a little bit differently in municipalities. So more focus on projects and service delivery, on honest, regular feedback, and the distribution of relevant information around projects to all stakeholders involved. Then another proposed action is around improving methods and practices of public participation. So I've spoken a bit about that, but there's a range of sort of quite practical things that came up, interesting, some good practice from municipalities around this, which I think we can share as well, which is important. There's also a recommendation around the need for public participation to be properly resourced and supported. So in some municipalities, this is the case, but in other municipalities, they're really struggling. Both the Office of the Speaker, the IDP office. I haven't really spoken about the institutional arrangements, but those are the two main units in the municipality are dealing with public participation, and often they just don't have the resources because it's not really something that is prioritized in the municipality. There's also a need for strong engagement by various departments in municipalities. So I've already mentioned this, that there's a sense that they're not really as engaged, that they don't really take it seriously. And we understand there's a lot for departments on their plates. Performance management, IDP, all the actual work, it's a lot. And we heard that. But there's a sense that there could be a little bit more engagement from departments in the IDP process, and that it might start with sort of more education around what it is. That might be one of the reasons. Having administration present at IDP meetings is something which, like I said, came up very strongly in the interviews, and a sense of just being able to have people there to report back on actual key issues that are facing the municipality. So to hear those voices in meetings is something that communities are really asking for. Public participation not being reduced to residents filling out complaints forms. This is something that came up, that, a lot of times the only engagement really with residents is around complaints, and a need to shift engagement and participation to be going just beyond complaints, to obviously have a system in place to deal with complaints, because there are a lot of service delivery complaints, but to understand that the IDP process is sort of bigger than that as well, and is slightly different than just dealing with service delivery complaints. So trying to have more focus on what does a different way of interacting with residents and communities look like in municipalities beyond just dealing with service delivery complaints. Then the need to increase youth involvement in municipal affairs in order to enhance public participation and planning. Like I mentioned, that was something that was highlighted a lot. The decisions taken through the IDP process have a substantial impact on the lives of young people, and they have a unique perspective in the municipality. Often they can be quite rowdy in meetings, we were told, and it can be quite difficult to sometimes deal with young people. But we also heard that their voices are really actually very important and useful, and that there is a sense that they need to be engaged more. It's sometimes just a question of how to do that, which is something I think we want to think about going forward. Municipalities can also benefit from greater stakeholder engagement and collaboration. So we feel like the current level of stakeholder engagement, sort of with civil society, with business, with other institutions, isn't as good as it should be, and can be improved. Another proposed area of action is around increased civic education in the IDP. So more education for communities and residents. And this can be in various forms. And there's people gave some really great, which is in the report, some great examples and ideas around how to do this as well. Also, to extend that kind of training and education to municipal officials and councillors and ward committees as well, to have also not to forget them when we're thinking about education around this. Then just needing to focus more, and this is in the municipalities where it isn't really a focus, needing to sort of focus a bit more on trying to make sure that beyond just the establishment of ward committees, that they're actually functioning in the municipality, we feel like is important. So it's lacking in a lot of places, and it is creating a significant gap in the public participation process. Linked to that is the need for more training and capacity building of ward committees. So ward committee members, like I said, this is something that came up time and time again from ward committees, is that they really are desperate for more training and education. They want to do their jobs. There's a perception, I think, a lot of cases that they don't want to do their jobs. And I think obviously it differs from municipality to municipality, from ward to ward, from ward committee member to ward committee member. I mean, you can't paint everyone with the same brush. But what we did here was a lot of enthusiasm for wanting to actually do the work and wanting to engage with communities and wanting to understand how the municipality works better. So there is that sense there. And I think it's just how to nurture it, which is something which we need to think about more. And so linked to that as well is improved resourcing and support. So there's small things that can be done that can actually boost morale. And maybe we need to think about some of those things as well when we engage with ward committees. Something that came up was a summary document of the IDP, which is supposed to be developed, but is not really happening, and it's not being circulated, and it's not being done in languages that people understand. So it's something that could be a small win in some municipalities that could be very useful, actually. A well-crafted summary of the IDP can be a very useful document. Then just this issue around the IDP in alignment with the budget and SDBIP. This is obviously a challenge. It's something which everyone acknowledges needs to happen, but it's sort of easier said than done. But just needing to have a focus on that, and also just trying to get down to the root causes of what is affecting underspending as well in municipalities is something that we think needs to happen. And it does seem like it is around planning and performance monitoring, and it is around communication in some cases. So there's a lot, obviously there's other things going on in municipalities, and we know that, and people told us about that. But it seems like those are some key ways to also try to address this. And then just a recommendation on performance management being taken seriously. We know now with the new staff regulations that it's getting cascaded now to all levels of the municipality. So we know that things are shifting quite a lot in terms of performance management in municipalities, and municipalities have been reacting in different ways to try to address this and to try to actually roll it out to all tiers in municipalities. But it's a difficult task. I think some learning and sharing from municipalities who are actually managing to do this and how they're managing to do this is important. And then just in terms of monitoring of KPIs and performance, trying to think a little bit more innovatively around community monitoring of performance as well is something we think municipalities could maybe benefit from. Then just in conclusion, and I know, sorry, I've been speaking for a long time, but thanks for indulging me. We've identified a lot of challenges, and this has come from, like I said, members of municipalities, ward councillors, municipal managers. People were very candid with us. They really told us a lot about what's going on, and there was a sense that they understand themselves that there are a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities that were identified. So we feel like in terms of implementing effective strategies, in terms of enhancing public participation, building effective and responsive governance structures, that there are a lot of opportunities, and trying to get to those is important. Just in terms of which we're going to have a discussion about later, but leading on to the co-creation of the compact toolbox. So just thinking from some of the recommendations and some of the findings around, okay, so now what? What are we going to do? How are we going to try to actually practically think about improving some of these things? And I think that's an important discussion to have, and it's something we really feel like we need the help of everyone in the room and partner municipalities and other stakeholders as well to think about this. And then also just to think about some of the other policy and advocacy implications of some of the findings. So if whether it be around policy refinement or advocacy or research, just trying to say, okay, so what does all of this mean in terms of some of the bigger picture? Obviously, we've only looked at 12 municipalities, but I think we have quite a good picture from the 12 municipalities. And what does this mean for other municipalities as well in the country? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you,
Great.
Kate.
Thank you so much, Jabu, and good afternoon. Is it afternoon? No, still morning. Good morning, everyone. And good morning and welcome to my panelists for this session. I'm very pleased to be joined by experts in the field and very knowledgeable panel. So looking forward to learning from some of their experiences and the various projects that they're involved in and programs, and seeing how we can, pick up some of the lessons from the work that they've been doing around public participation and accountability to inform the toolbox development, but also to enrich the process and the learnings, and hoping that our partner municipalities in the room as well will be able to pick up some of the innovations that are happening across the country. Without further delay, let me take the opportunity to introduce my panelists. We have Mr. Colin Ramole, who is from SALGA, our advisor in governance. We have Mr. Nishendra Moodley here representing the Towns Action Network. We also have Mr. Yanis Chamda, who is representing Action for Accountability, which is another EU co-funded program under the umbrella of Enhancing Accountability in South Africa. And then we have Dr. Paul Plantinga, who is from the HSRC, and he is representing some work that they're doing around public participation or e-public participation, which we're quite excited to also hear about. All right. I think we can get started, and please, as you introduce yourselves as well, as you respond to some of the questions that we'll ask. We'll keep it quite conversational, so we'll have about a 40-minute discussion on the panel, and then we'll open up for questions and answers for about 20 minutes, and that should take us to the full hour. Great. So if I can start with the panelists, and starting with you, Colin, if you can tell us a little bit about the program that you're representing on this panel, how it aims to support accountability in local government, and particularly, representing SALGA and the approach that SALGA follows to support municipalities around public participation. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, my name is Paul, and I'm with SALGA in Inclusive Governance and Council and Welfare. Yeah, in the Council and Welfare Unit. What we do there, we empower, we capacitate municipalities on various governance issues. And key to that is community involvement and community organizations involvement in matters of municipalities. And colleagues should know that public participation is one of the most legislated functions of the municipality. So we help municipalities in actually understanding the actual public participation provision, starting with the Constitution in section 152, where it talks about them having to involve communities and community organizations. We go to all these provisions, and there's one provision that has been taken for granted, is the MFMA. If you look at the provisions of MFMA on what municipality should do before it spends money, you can tell that we haven't started doing as much as we should be doing. Yeah, I think that is basically what we do. We go across the country, ensuring that what committees are established. We collaborate with Bokokta to ensure that what committees are capacitated, they know exactly what to do. We have CDWs as well, working with ward councillors. Recently, we are working with ward councillors and traditional leaders, where they are traditional leaders, because there's been a gap between them and municipalities. So we're trying to fuse what might be a conflict or an emerging conflict between traditional leaders and ward councillors. Colleagues would know that South Africa is actually a monarch, because we have 854 traditional leaders vis-a-vis 257 municipalities. So if this relationship is not meant well, we might be heading towards a very serious challenge. I wonder whether should I stop here or continue? Maybe let me pause. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So once again, I'm Nishendra Moodley. I'm from an organization called EDP, Economic Development Partnership. And we are a not-for-profit public benefit organization that convenes diverse stakeholders to come together to address quite complex problems, particularly those in a low trust, low certainty environment. We convene the Towns Action Network, and I've been asked to speak here today about the Towns Action Network. But just about the EDP once more is that we work with the public sector in being able to strengthen relationships within departments, across different departments and different spheres of government, and between the state and non-state actors in this work, particularly to achieve collective impact. Okay, so the TAN, and I'm here to speak about the TAN. The TAN is really a national, the Towns Action Network is a national platform that is action inspired, and it's aimed at connecting particularly change makers working in small towns and to connect them cross-sectorally across government, civil society, and the private sector for small town regeneration and mutual accountability. Its aim is really to strengthen and connect citizens and citizen initiatives with government initiatives. In South African small towns face a great degree of difficulty, particularly given extensive droughts that have occurred, exit of skills from small towns, deteriorating infrastructure and services. And this has caused a number of people, well, businesses to relocate, affecting the economy of small towns, and caused a number of skilled people to leave those small towns. And often municipal performance is a major determinant of that. So the TAN tries to, however, showcase initiatives and innovation that is aimed at improving governance in small town regeneration, and one that strengthens municipality and citizen participation. So as I mentioned, the EDP convenes the TAN, but together with support partners, Ranyaka, Kagiso Trust, who are here, Restaurare, V6 Changemakers, Karoo Development Foundation, Accountability Lab SA, and includes SALGA and COMPACT PARI as well. And it's been really involved in empowering change makers and active citizens in those communities, connecting them with others who are doing similar work, connecting citizen initiatives with municipal initiatives, and utilizing different innovative and creative formats like a carnival connection carnival that was held last year and showcased the role of creativity and culture in placemaking. There's been a focus on storytelling, particularly spotlighting what is strong rather than what is wrong in the kind of municipal small town environment. This has been an attempt to showcase potential for sustainable impact and change. So there's been some interesting work that's been done in Grabo with the Small Towns Action Network, where a number of the partners have been involved in a Grabo action plan and initiating a steering committee, and the strengthening of regional partnerships between the Grabo community and the Granadendal community around the work that's been done in Grabo. This is some of the kind of local level organizing, empowerment, and capability development work that's happening in the Small Towns Network.
May I proceed? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Greetings, everybody. My name is Yunus. I'm with a project called Action for Accountability. I'm with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Just a little bit about the program. Action for Accountability is a project that involves 3 partners. So the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation being one of those partners. The other is the Public Service Accountability Monitor, which is attached to Rhodes University out in Makanda. And then Accountability Lab SA, which is one of the participants in your TAN, Nishendra. So those are the 3 partners that make up this project. We've dubbed the program, the project A4A, Action for Accountability. We've selected 4 sites in which to establish the activities and the actions that we undertake. And the 4 sites are deliberately chosen to be extremely diverse because we wanted to deliberately find what is the experiences of residents and communities in relation to all the aspects around accountability, public participation, etc. So we chose Lenasia as one site. We chose Mondio, which is a suburb of Johannesburg, as a second site, and Finetown as a third site. And these three sites are all in the city of Johannesburg. And our fourth site is Makanda, which is in the Eastern Cape, part of the Makanda municipality. So four very different sites. And in these sites, we've established civic action teams, small community teams that take forward the actions that we are working on. So what is broadly, there are three broad areas of work that this project undertakes. The first is to organize a community team, to take that community team through a series of trainings and learnings, and to support them and to prompt them to take on accountability issues. So that's the first broad area of work. The second broad area of work is something that you mentioned, Nishendra, early on, and that is using invented and invited spaces. And we're having some very interesting experiences in that regard. So of course, the invited spaces are the ones primarily driven by government, and where they send out invitations either to select groups or to open community meetings. We take our community groups and we prepare them for each invited space. So they don't go into these meetings unprepared. We look at the agenda, we try and interrogate the issues that are going to come under discussion, so that when these community groups go into an invited space, they are far better prepared to engage with the issues that are going to be raised. And then we try and fill the gaps through the invented spaces, and where we identify that there are weaknesses, we try and plug those by creating our own spaces, which we then open up to the public. So a very interesting one, because we have three of our sites in the city of Joburg. 2 days ago, City of Joburg released their public participation report. Wonderful. We are thrilled that they've released the report, because now they've put into writing what they say they've done. And now they've committed in writing, what is it that they're going to address? So what are we going to do with our three civic action teams? We're going to interrogate their report. Firstly, there are lots of issues that are raised in that report about each of these three sites that we operate in. Where they access that information is going to be an interesting discussion, because it doesn't correlate with the issues that were raised by the communities with us. So that's the first area. And the second thing we'll be asking upon that report is, so you've raised all these issues, thank you very much. So tell us, what are you going to do about it? And who do we hold accountable for delivering on those issues? And we'll track that. That's an example of, and then we'll create our own invented space in each of those sites, just to interrogate the IDP process, the public participation, and that particular report that has just been released. Our engagements with our two municipalities, obviously in Makanda, the minister, I think 3 days ago, released or made a statement that the municipality was only able to spend about 45% of its budget, and that's the level of crisis in Makanda. And yet that community is, suffering from water issues, from sanitation issues, etc., etc. City of Joburg, it's been an interesting experience. The coalition government has been a very interesting government to engage with. We started off, we introduced Action for Accountability to the Office of the Speaker. We had a fantastic reception, and we were looking forward to 3 years of intense participation and taking accountability issues to civil servants in the city of Johannesburg. Needless to say that within a few weeks, there was a political change. And since then, we have been unable to get any sort of meaningful engagement with the city of Johannesburg. In fact, with the city of Johannesburg, and I'm glad in your annual report, PARI has flagged the issue of a city in crisis. I mean, we now really have to start talking about a city in crisis, and what do citizens do? Lots of infrastructure in the city of Johannesburg has reached the end of its lifespan. It's gone beyond its lifespan, and it's now at a point of critical collapse. And I think that's a likely scenario that's going to really emerge. There are a couple of other questions that have been asked, but let me pause there and we'll address the others as the conversation unfolds.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thanks again for this opportunity. Nice to be invited to this space, being a bit of an outsider, and nice to see what's happening with the project. So as mentioned, I'm Paul from the Human Sciences Research Council in a unit called the Impact Center. So we are a little bit more external facing than a lot of what our other researchers do. And just in case you don't know, the Human Sciences Research Council is a state-funded, largely state-funded research council focusing on social sciences. So we do large surveys around political, health-related issues, etc. But as mentioned, we're a little bit more external facing in our unit, and do work around projects that are closer to the, I suppose, the policy, civil society interface. Just as some background, I joined the HSRC somewhat recently. Previously, I was in provincial government in Gauteng, working on innovation programs there. But otherwise, what I wanted to focus on today was, and the reason I was invited is because of another EU-funded project. I don't know what we'd do without the EU, clearly. So this one is actually under the Department of Science and Innovation, focusing on participation. It's one of 6 projects actually under a broader program supporting municipal innovation. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called VVISDP, and it's something that the DSI can speak about more broadly. But as mentioned, we're focusing on e-participation. You've probably run into e-participation over the years. It's resurfaced again 10, 15 years later. But I think what's quite interesting now is a lot of what municipalities have explored back in the day around using digital platforms to support public participation has matured, but they also have some lessons. So really what we're looking to do is to see what's already happening in municipalities. And you're probably familiar with complaints management systems and reporting of issues on service delivery through either applications or on websites or on SMS. So that's quite established in many municipalities. But what the Department of Science and Innovation and EU are interested in is how web platforms, digital technologies can be used to support engagement around what's called policy very broadly. So that includes anything related to planning, policy, bylaws, etc., and supporting consultation, public participation around those processes. So the aim of the project is really to pilot new e-participation initiatives in 6 municipalities. So currently, and it changes, currently we're working with a few metros, so eThekwini, City of Cape Town, City of Tshwane, but also Rustenburg, Waterberg, Emalahleni. So let's just give you a sense of who we're currently working with, but it's a little bit fluid. So we have others coming in and out, potentially joining the project. So as mentioned, the idea is that we're going to pilot projects, physical, tangible projects on the ground with the municipalities. Importantly, as I was saying, because this space is now relatively mature in a very loose sense, so many municipalities have websites, they're putting their IDPs up on their website, they're inviting comments by email. Whether that's working or not, whether anyone's actually sending comments by email is another question. We're just very aware that there are already processes in place using existing technologies, and that could include Facebook groups, etc. We want to see how working with the municipalities, we can improve on what's already being done. That might be, for example, using their existing CRM platforms, might be using their Facebook groups, using their website, looking at how we can just enhance what they have, because we want to avoid the approach which I think has been done previously about kind of building a new platform that then has to be maintained and usually after a pilot project cannot be sustained. So we're trying to work much more with the municipalities to kind of co-create new ways of working with the existing technology or new technology that they can support participation. And I'll comment a bit more later.
Great. Thank you very much, panelists, for those introductory remarks around the programs and projects that you're involved in. I think some observations coming to the fore is we have quite diverse contexts in which each of these programs and projects are working. And I think what Colin had raised at the beginning, the interface with traditional authorities being quite strong in our rural municipalities, linking in also to some of the findings that Kate presented on around farm workers and access to farm workers to participate in public participation processes. We have work being done in small towns, which is also a very other context, and some of the issues around small towns are quite specific. And then we also have the metros, the intermediary or secondary cities that are, using more ICT technology and e-participation platforms. So already just from this, getting a sense of who's on our panel, we already get a sense of the need for a differentiated approach to addressing accountability and public participation issues in municipalities. So just to surface some of those issues. And I think our next conversation would really be around, I think everyone in the room is aware of the need for public participation, its relevance, its significance. But I want to bring it to the context of the work that you're doing and in the experiences that you've encountered in the work that you're doing. If you could speak to some of the issues that you've seen, that have, the issues that have arisen in the work that you've done that kind of strengthen the argument for accountability and public participation. So more evidence-based from the context of the work that you've been doing. Maybe we can start with you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, our colleagues, you see, the work that we do more of the support and capacity development of municipal structures. By structures, we mean council, we mean officials, we mean councillors, up to the level of ward committees. We ensure that community participation become a core of everybody, that it should cut across, like each and every unit should know that whatever they do, they're doing it for the community. And at a particular point, they have to actually get information or relay information back to communities. And we ensure that municipalities adopt strong and resilient public participation policies. They build their structures and provide the necessary they are provided the necessary support by all spheres of government, like COMPACT. At national, it has the responsibility towards empowering municipality to perform better on matters of public participation. And as SALGA in that unit, we also ensure that municipal councils, colleagues, through speakers, mayors, ward councillors, ward committees, CDWs, traditional leaders, as well as municipal officials, they see this public participation as an important bridge to connect communities with municipalities, including other stakeholders that are not necessarily participating within the ward committees. And the other important thing is that these municipal stakeholders have to ensure that communication, community participation and involvement, it plays a central role in policy development, in the IDP, in budgeting, as well as in performance management. Many would think that communities shouldn't be involved when it comes to matters of performance management. But when we look at Section 42 of the Systems Act, it says they should be part and parcel of the delivery processes of a municipality at any given time. We also ensure that ward committees are representatives of different interests within communities. These are things that we tell to municipalities, and we caution that they should not allow ward committees to be taken over by political interests or political parties, which is a very big challenge now. And we also talk to municipalities that these ward committees should be non-partisan, and they should work with everybody to ensure that a service delivery is advanced. Then we also have, like I said, CDWs. CDWs are there in the space. They have a tendency of, at a particular point, contesting with what councillors. So from time to time, we work with COCTA on matters of CDW, working together with ward councillors, working together with ward committees, and we also encourage them to work on what we call ward-based planning. You see, in ward-based planning is that every ward must have its simple kind of a plan, and if a municipality is well-resourced, they can actually be able to give that particular ward a particular budget for them to run their own program, They only support the work through technical support, through compliance with whatever procurement processes that might be there in their space. And the other thing that we emphasize is on matters of accountability, that whenever they meet, everybody who has been given a task to perform, we start with the executive mayor. Executive mayor should know that his or her role would be to provide accountability to council back to communities. But accountability does not exist alone. There must also be strong oversight in the municipality, because sometimes people do not voluntarily account. Some who do not volunteer to account, they should be made to account. And if you look at the role of the speaker now, it has been enhanced. And the speaker is a champion of accountability, of oversight. And we mean, when the speaker holds the mayor accountable, they are not actually hating the mayor. They are doing what is actually required in local government space. These are what we call twin relationships, where you have accountability, you have oversight. They need one another. No concept can function on its own. Then it means if oversight is weak, accountability might also be weak. It might not be as strong as it should be. And the same process should filter down to communities where what councillors are given information from the council to account back to communities, and communities should be prepared. And that is the area that is still lacking, the resilience of our community. Like this, the NDP says that they should be empowered to be able to hold the officials and political appointees accountable. We see it happening, but it is not happening as strong as it should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thanks. Yeah, so to kind of respond to your question, Rebecca, around where can we show the evidence for the importance of public participation? I mean, I think that I would say that the value of participation is particularly in being able to mobilize the energy and the creativity of people, and particularly to mobilize them as agents of their own change, as the architects of their own change that needs to happen in their lives. So they're not passive players that are recipients of services, but active creators of the conditions under which they would want to thrive and try to set the environment. And it's important that we are not just developing towns or places or neighborhoods and so on, but we're developing the people in the process. So participation allows us to further developmental goals of basic services and so on, but at the same time build the capability of people to be able to govern their own neighborhoods and their own spaces. And probably where I can probably cite some evidence for this is actually in another project that I worked on over the last 3 years in Soweto, which was the development of a Soweto area development framework. And this was a bottom-up developed plan for what the central area of Soweto needs to look like and what kind of investment needs to be prioritized in Soweto, and particularly what kind of intergovernmental, both provincial and city investment needs to happen in that space, as well as what the private sector and communities will contribute to that. So it was a co-developed plan, but that recognized contributions from each of these players. And we wouldn't have been able to set up a plan that was directly responsive to the needs of people and some of the limitations that the communities were facing, particularly with regard to the development of kind of backyards and development of small-scale rental housing possibilities. They were quite constrained by the fact that old grandmothers who are owning this property without any proof of tenure had no way of passing this on clearly to their dependents once they died, because there weren't title deeds and so on for this. And all of that needed to be regularized, and that there needed to be a project. But it's only that came up through the engagement with particularly old women who were owning backyard, small-scale rental housing possibilities in Soweto. But we wouldn't have had an intergovernmental plan and a societal contribution plan that constituted what civil society would and communities would deliver as part of the plan? What would businesses deliver as part of the plan? What would city deliver in terms of its capital projects in that space? And what provincial government would support in that space if we didn't have the level of engagement and participation of communities to be able to drive their development and to be able to own that? But it's also important to remember that participation is not just one thing. There's a level of depth in participation. And there's a kind of ladder that the writers like Arnstein in the 70s wrote about a ladder of public participation. And that's happened to frame some of our frameworks since then, because you do get the idea from informing to consulting to co-producing to co-deciding to even delegating and giving control over to a community to make decisions as well. And that there's different levels of depth of that participation. And I think that we need to go through a kind of maturity cycle in being able to travel that path and to be able to set up the right mechanisms for participation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I come to the issue of participation, I just want to quickly correct something that I said earlier. Well, not correct, I just want to add something on. So I did indicate that our work has 3 broad areas, and I mentioned 2, and then my train of thought went somewhere else. So I missed out on the 3rd important one. And the 3rd important one is that in our project, we have an area of work called integrity icons. And that's the nice part of our project. It's the name and fame part of our project. So in our communities that we work in, we're now harvesting nominations of outstanding civic leaders and outstanding civil servants. So if you go to a police station and there's somebody that's always pleasant and helpful, we want to know that who that person is. If there's a librarian that goes beyond the call of duty to service the community, we want to know who that is. And we're gathering these nominations, and we're going to try and build it up to an award ceremony so that we can also celebrate the good civil servants that are out there that are really working hard to try and address the issue. So I thought it's important that I just correct that first. But on the issue of public participation, the reality is that the trust levels are so low that if we really look at our public participation in the sites that we're involved in, they are in some areas depressingly low. But I think it's indicative of the low level of trust that communities have in just about anything that promises to address the issues. There's just a lack of faith and confidence. So we deliberately chose these different sites, and it's giving us different feedback on engaging and with government and on participation. In poor communities, we have good attendance at public engagement, where people still seem to hold out the hope that something will come out of attending those meetings and engaging. And we have high levels of participation in Makanda, in a municipality that still spends less than half its budget, and that still has all these service delivery problems. And that again just compounds that there's no reward for your participation. So how do you encourage people to participate? In Finetown, we have a similar belief, fairly good participation in an area that's poor. In Lenasia, which is predominantly middle class, and there's a low level of engagement. You can hardly get people to come to public meetings. You have to work real hard to get 50 people to a meeting, right? Girish, we were just looking at photographs of UDF. In 1983 in Lenasia, the Civic Center on an issue or at a meeting, you could get over 1,500 people crammed into the Civic Center. You can't get 50 people to a meeting, right? In Mondio, it's even more difficult. It's a suburb where it's extremely difficult to get participation. So we have a responsibility to try and ensure that when we do get community members engaging, that we can do something that shows a meaningful return for their effort and for their sacrifice. And if we can do that, you can slowly start encouraging people to come back and engage publicly. Now, we have done something successfully. I'll hold that for later. Maybe we'll share some of those successes. and how we can present that to the community as a clear reward for sacrifice and effort. Thank you.
I had other comments, but I think I just limit myself to maybe the technology perspective. And I think just from an opportunity side of things, I think, as you were saying, I think supporting accountability, oversight, and especially transparency around that for communities, it seems like an obvious opportunity for the technology space and just making information available. And that's been a lot of the work of the broader open data movement. And I think a lot of the earlier discussion, and I think the research findings pointed to that whilst that information is being made available, it's not accessible in any way. You've got IDPs that are 500 to 1,000 pages that are just not accessible in real terms. So how can that be done and there's small actions that can be taken to improve that just to get our kind of hygiene levels of communication improved. I think the other part of the technology space, which is seen as an opportunity, is to just be able to reflect what the public is saying more actively, so that people can see that their voice is there, and it's more the traceability of. And we've had municipalities say that they want to show when people participate in something, they want to show that those participation inputs are captured and then are in the final, maybe if it's not incorporated in the final recommendations or action plan or whatever, but at least they can see their inputs have been captured and acknowledged. So they see an opportunity for technology again supporting that, obviously managing things around anonymity and privacy, etc. And then, as Nishendra was saying, there's a sense that technology can support engagement, especially amongst young people, and especially using some of the emerging platforms, social media, etc. But municipalities have big, and you might experience this, they have Facebook groups where they shut down the comments, they disable the comments because they're so abusive. And because if you're asking for input on, say, a planning or a bylaw issue, most of the comments are related to service delivery issues in a very specific sense. So how can say social media managers or comms teams more effectively manage abuse, manage conversations online, and I think those are all skills that we're all learning, and that perhaps municipalities are going to need to explore more if these tools can be used going forward.
Great, thank you for those reflections. Some very insightful, reflections from the work that you've been doing and the programs that you're involved in. And I think one thing that resonates very strongly, I think, with this project is, and I'm going to quote Nishendra here, the significance of public participation being to build the capability of people to govern. I think that's a very powerful statement. And I think it's something that needs to be kind of entrenched in the minds of our municipalities as well, that we are not just doing this as a tick boxing exercise. It's not just to ensure that our plans are seamless and that there are no protests down the road, but it is embedding that capability and empowering the residents to take ownership of their spaces and their communities and eventually be responsible for governing their communities. I thought that was very powerful. I think another thing that I'm actually picking up from this panel, and as well as reflecting on kind of linking it also to the research findings, is in this project and in local government, I think we can think of accountability as a matrix, right? We can speak about accountability as the kind of vertical accountability, so flowing between the municipality, the communities, and we can have the administrative political interface in between. And then we have the horizontal accountability, which is, I think, where we're trying to also get at with our advocacy efforts. What is the accountability from how IDP commitments are captured in, or commitments are captured in the IDP, and how they trickle down to SDBIP, to KPIs, how the municipal official is then held responsible and accountable for delivering on that. So it's quite, when we're speaking about accountability, I don't want us to get lost in, are we talking about it in the vertical space or in the horizontal space? And I think our civil society representatives are directing it more along the vertical space, and from SALGA's perspective and the reflections that Colin has been given, there's a kind of sentiment around the horizontal accountability within the municipality. So just something to bear in mind. I think in our last round of conversation, I'm going to combine kind of two questions for your reflection. We've heard a little bit about some of the technology tools and e-participation and innovations that HSRC is trying to surface and promote. We've heard about, some of the partnerships that both TAN and Action for Accountability are using to strengthen, the work and their efforts. But let's hear a little bit more about the tools that you are actually using through the programs that you are representing. And if you can share a little bit about that, and perhaps in your reflection of, or in your sharing of the tools that you use, if you could reflect on at least one lesson that you want to share with the room in how you've implemented or used the tools that you'll be speaking about. Can start with you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, our colleagues, one thing that one has picked is that there are municipalities that are not actually able to tell their story, especially on performance. Because when you look at a municipality, it's always busy. It has different departments, different units. One big one is within finance, which is the indigent and interaction with the indigents. You see, you never hear a municipality telling us about how many indigents do they have in their space. And you also go to community development, the NGOs they support. You go to offices of the mayors, the learners they give bursaries, the NGOs they are working with, and various stakeholders. Okay, now I want to get into this, that colleagues, you would know, and I think it has been agreed upon, that local government in many countries is seen as an institution for enhancement of democracy and a vehicle for development. I think that we agree on. But most of what we've been doing until COVID were things that we would do, especially when we engage with communities. We would prefer physical engagement. Then COVID caught us with our pens down to a point that we needed now to be innovative and come up with a different mechanisms to keep government going, even when people could not be in the same space at the same time. And we had collaborations that we entered into. I did not want to brag earlier on that we're working with Kahiso Trust, we're working with Plan Act to ensure that we strengthen the role of a civil movement into the work of local municipalities. And I'll also be glad to get contacts of my colleagues here so that we actually bring them on board if they are not already on board. So through the collaborations that we did with UNDP, we looked at what is called Let's Talk. It's an app done by a very young South African. We tested it in the areas of Thulamela in Limpopo. The thing is that there were not enough funds, and then it went through difficult phases. But it is an app that is quite important, where a councillor could simply engage communities from wherever is seated, where a councillor or a mayor, you just instruct that app on what is it that you want to do with on that particular day. The mayor alone can address community. The speaker alone can address a community on a particular matter. So that is one of the best things that we started doing, and we are happy in that municipality. They are looking into that. We were actually encouraging them to look into the possibilities of, from time to time, having hybrid systems like we're having here. We are here physically, others are not here. And that, I think, is the way the world should go, and that is the way our municipalities should also go. And one important thing that one has to mention before we end this discussion is that, you see, since 2000, in this country, we have brought citizens more closer to government than before. And remember that here it's a democratically elected local government structure, which was not the case before. And the rationale for such an approach is that there is inherent value in giving people space to influence decisions that affect them. And it helps to build their capacity and them contributing into the empowerment their own empowerment as well as contributing to service delivery matters. And colleagues, local government in this country, by its very nature of bringing government closer to the people, ought to make translation of community needs into policy. And I think that is what is happening through the IDP until it comes to the SDBIPs. And I think we should all agree that locally based decisions are often more practical and sustainable. And we've seen that in many areas where councillors and municipalities work very close with communities, then they are able actually to do what they actually agree that they will be doing. So I think in that submission, one would say it is important for citizens, it is important for municipalities, it is important for municipal officials and NGOs to work closer together to eliminate what are actually the weaknesses of governance that we see. That is why we are pulling on traditional leaders that you see, when villages do not work, people move from those communities because there's no life. Now, if we make traditional communities work, we make local rural areas work, then there wouldn't be any need for those people to migrate from wherever they are to come to Joburg for more frustrations that they are facing. So primarily, that is what actually facilitator we are working on. We do a lot of projects alone as SALGA and others with the civil society organizations and with other development partners. Thank you very much.
Okay, so in speaking about tools, starting with the Towns Action Network, I mentioned earlier that there's this use of storytelling amongst a number of the partners in the Towns Action Network, and I see this as a tool. And I've kind of mentioned the fact that the storytelling in the form of, for instance, Accountability Lab as engaging youth filmmakers to be able to make films and videos about their neighborhood and so on, starts to focus around on the kind of what's strong, rather than just focusing on the what's wrong in their neighborhoods. And we mustn't not ignore the what's wrong, but by balancing the what's strong and what's wrong, we start to, in engagement with municipal officials and so on, create trust in that process. So it's not seen as a complete indictment of the municipal environment and municipalities and so on. So I think that storytelling is quite an important part. Another tool that's being developed right now is this catalog of offers and needs. So an interchange on a website that, because there are a number of 350 or so on change makers all around South Africa that are working and are part of the TAN network, they can be able to put forward offers and needs. So for instance, if your organization needs social media expertise and another organization has social media expertise, this is an opportunity to connect them. So that's another tool that's being utilized. But if I had to concentrate then on just the lessons that, the important lessons that have come out of this, and I think from the TAN's shown us that citizen initiatives are significantly important, and we must work with those change makers that are working outside the municipal system, but connecting them with the municipal system and recognizing the importance of those invented spaces that citizens are creating to be able to engage with their municipalities. And we've, together with a whole lot of other invented spaces, we've got to recognize the important creative work that's being done by civil society elsewhere around mechanisms to engage their local governments on that aren't ward committees and IDP forums, like social audits being utilized by a number of social movements to be able to engage in a conversation with their municipalities about basic service delivery in a way that NGO world has researched and provided a social audit as a way of engaging their local municipalities. The community scorecard, which the HSRC actually piloted in Cape Town, in Overcome Heights and then in Nyanga, quite important development of tools and methodologies to be able to engage around municipal services, but in a different context, not utilizing the traditional means. So these are all other examples of tools being utilized interestingly. And then finally, the really important lesson is that capabilities matter, and that we're really trying to develop the capabilities of municipal officials to be able to value and to work with the inputs that civil society and communities can make, and to utilize that in their processes, but at the same time develop the capabilities of citizens and communities to engage robustly with municipal officials in a way that furthers their kind of needs and aspirations. Thank you.
One of the components of the Action for Accountability project is called the Activist Media Incubator. And that's the storytelling that Nishendran has referred to already. Very powerful when young people go and capture the stories from the community. We then help them to write them up. We have competent writers and journalists mentoring these young and upcoming media activists and get their stories out. And that's very encouraging. The other thing that the project has implemented is a training program called the Fundamentals of Social Accountability Monitoring, FSAM. It's a training program that was conceptualized and written up by Rhodes University. And so all our CIVAC teams have gone through that training, and it's made a huge difference as to how they engage with public participation once they've gone through that training. We've also just developed an accountability toolkit, which we are going to run for a couple of months in a test phase so that we get feedback and we can refine it. And it's really, if you want to do accountability work, here's a manual, follow the steps and see what you get out of it. And let's see if we can enhance it before we produce a final version early next year. So we're in that phase. We're quite low tech in our project, Paul. We wish we had funds to do some more sophisticated work. But, you know, if you really want to do something, technology, you know, the entry level for technology has dropped fundamentally in such a way that you can actually do things with free apps. So, for example, in all our sites, we do regular surveys. And we use the Kobo toolkit, which is a free app, right? And we're able to send out our community facilitators to go and run surveys on this free app that's on a smartphone. Of course, we had to buy smartphones for everybody. But with that, we're able to generate quite a bit of data about various issues in the sites that we're operating in. On the lessons learned, I mean, we learn lessons every day doing this kind of work, and there's quite a few of them. And, you know, the accountability work is hard. You know, it sounds easy, but just try and take an issue and try and find out who is responsible and accountable for this. It's a simple statement and a simple question, but go and test it in reality, and you'll realize just how hard it is to find somebody that you can sit across the table with who is actually responsible for something. It's hard. You need consistency. You need to keep plugging away. You need to put up, you need to sometimes light the fire. You need to go out into the media to create pressure for something to be addressed. So in Finetown, there was a clinic that was built by government, and it stood unused for 4 years because somewhere there was just no will to get it opened. And Action for Accountability ran a consistent campaign, literally on a daily and weekly basis, to put pressure to get that clinic opened. And we learned one important lesson that we will document and write up in our project. When you're trying to solve an issue, you tend to engage those that are at ground level that you see every day. Mm-hmm. Here's a lesson that we've learned. You want to solve a problem? Start at the top. Start at the top. I don't know why we had this perception that you need to work your way from the bottom up to solve a problem. So 2 examples. Finetown Clinic, unopened for 4 years. We've been engaging the Gauteng Provincial Department of Health and City of Joburg and all those officials that kept coming to do inspections with absolutely no progress. Write a letter to the MEC, you put the MEC, you hold the MEC accountable for that situation. Within weeks, the clinic was open. You turn up the heat, but you start at the top. In Mondio, there are these massive trenches where water infrastructure was installed. Project is completed in terms of the piping. The trenches are left open. The contractor is gone. Huge, massive trenches, creating all sorts of hazards. You try engaging with Joburg Water, Rand Water, the officials that are there on site, no progress. Write a letter to the chairperson of the board of Rand Water. Within a few days, we get a written response. We get all the facts about the project. We had to make a PARI application to get details about that project. We didn't need that anymore because when we write to the chairperson, literally within a few days, we got a response. So the lesson we've learned, don't waste your time at the bottom. Start at the top and then just keep plugging away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yanis. Paul, sorry, before you come in, there's an announcement from the venue. Someone has left their driver's door unlocked. It's a white Toyota, registration plate LG88WLGP. So if that's your car, please be advised that you need to lock your door. All right. Thanks, Paul. You can take it away.
Sure. I think I'll just go back to your specific point. And I think that's one of the lessons for us is that the role of technology is not about finding a platform, or, implementing a platform. I come from private sector where we used to implement platforms, and that's fine in specific circumstances. But what we're seeing is, and I suppose our approach is very much just how can we build capacity to identify technologies that could be more appropriate and that are usually free, as you say. So as an example, City of Joburg, for their IDP and their ward committee elections, IDP consultations and ward committee elections, they just used WhatsApp and Canva to develop really interactive kind of little adverts that could go out. They could update them regularly without much effort. And essentially they were running them, as many of us do in the public sector, running them off their own budget as municipal officials. So I mean, that's just, there's so many more opportunities now to use existing technologies. And the real art is how do you find them and how do you assemble them in a way that can be useful going forward? And there are some governance things that need to then be built in around that. So we have to do things safely. We have to take care. So some of the way municipalities might be doing stuff starts to become risky, and I think that does need to be addressed, but there's less of a technology focus now. It's more about assembling tools and addressing some of those governance issues around data and personal information, etc. The other thing, and from our side, and I think it's come up today a lot, is how do technologies being used more by community-based organizations, civil society, etc., to organize themselves, collect information, and then to engage with government in its various forms. So the question then is, how do municipalities or government entities then respond to that? What are their, so there's a technology element, but often there's just more of a process and a rules kind of thing. Is, how do you deal with these engagements from the bottom up that are being supported by technology? And that's the whole civic tech space. Which is another area we work in, but I think the focus of this project is very much on what the municipality capacity is. I do just want to finish off with really 4 tool areas that we focus on, and that's what we're trying to explore with municipalities, and they might use 1 or 2 or more of them. So the first I think I've mentioned is just about making information more accessible and usable, and so a lot of that's just about how things are formatted, how it's presented, and using some tools to support that. The other is then the engagement side of things, as I mentioned. So if moving beyond just making information available, how does some kind of two-way interaction, how can that be done? And again, lots of municipalities are using WhatsApp as an example for service delivery issue reporting. So they've been thinking, and they've tried to use WhatsApp for, say, IDP consultations, and they've got quite limited interaction. So they're trying to think about how can that still be used? Can WhatsApp be used? how and can it be more effective? So that kind of interaction side of things. There's issues around zero rating data costs, so that people who can't afford data costs can still effectively participate. So lots of those kinds of things are just around more interaction. And then there's the more civic education, but in our case, I suppose civic tech education around, okay, and firstly also understanding the processes around planning, etc. But then what role can data or technology play in supporting engagement in that process? So there are some interesting projects around the country doing that already, where especially working with young people and equipping them to understand data, work with data to make more meaningful contributions to an IDP process. So that it's not just a complaint, it's a evidence-informed submission to a policy or a bylaw or an IDP submission. So again, and then lastly, we're looking at how information can be organized and just reflect better the voices of the community that are coming through these processes. So it can just be more transparent, kind of end to end, in terms of people seeing what they've contributed through supported by technology. But ultimately, these are process questions.
Great. Thank you, panelists, for sharing those tools and lessons from the work that you do. Quite a variety of tools. Some are more directed at assisting communities to advocate strongly for themselves through their lived experiences. Others are directed at capacity building the community in terms of how to engage with the municipality. Others are, still emerging technologies. And I think what the point that Paul kind of ended on, and I think that's quite powerful, is that there is existing tools, technologies, systems, processes that are already in place that perhaps just need to be optimized or need to be kind of reshuffled to suit the context of the municipality. And I think that's something that we also need to take into the next session as we begin thinking about what this toolbox could actually look like. I must say some of the lessons, we are very privileged, Yanis, around this project is that we have the buy-in from executive mayors, speakers, MMs. So there's already that kind of starting at the top for this process of COMPACT and the learnings coming out of COMPACT from the municipality. And one of the things that I think we need to also bear in mind is to ensure that whatever tools are developed, whatever whatever tools are developed are actually taken ownership of by the municipality. And that's the power of co-creation. Our intention is not to impose tools and ways of doing things on the municipality, on the community, but it's to find ways to develop these systems or these tools together to ensure that, there's shared ownership, to ensure that it translates well within the municipal structure, it translates well within the institutional arrangements that exist, and it's easier to adopt in that sense. So I think, just to tie together the panel discussion and also in some ways start to position us towards the following session. So thank you very much to our panelists. I note that we are kind of running behind time, but I think we'll open up for 1 or 2 questions from the floor, and we'll also open up to our virtual participants, also 1 or 2 questions on the platform. I see there's one hand at the back, sisters, and one hand here, Paul and Eugene and Lindiwe. So it's 4, that's 4 questions. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll go to the virtual platform. Thanks. No, Desiree. Thank you.
Thank you to the panel and the issues raised by the panel and the amount of work that has been done in this area, especially in terms of the accountability framework. I think as Colin has indicated, SALGA is doing so much work to just make municipalities aware of the responsibilities, the accountabilities, and also in terms of how and what to do. But when you look at the initial thought process of the white paper. The white paper on local government was perceived on an ideal situation. And that ideal situation said that we are having 3 spheres of government. We are distinct yet interrelated. And I like what one of the panelists said, starting from the top actually helps and it solves problems. But I am again saying the white paper never took such an imperative consideration. It was more bottom up. Even the conceptualization of the white paper was this perfect situation around municipalities at local level. They're going to be able to do everything. They're going to be able to do and deliver and. And yet when you look at the, I think Khalil will bear me out here. Following the white paper, there was an IDP toolkit. That was the how part. And further to that came the what-based planning. We worked with the Plan Act long ago to say, how do we do what-based planning? How do we quantify inputs from communities and their own planning and their own needs and their own necessities into the IDP process? But all of those issues have been ignored for years. They have been ignored for years to such an extent that we find ourselves in a situation now where when you look at the first presentation, we know all the challenges. We can say we're sitting here and we know all the solutions, but there's just a disjuncture somewhere. And we need to find that disjuncture. That's a very critical disjuncture. And all of us sitting here, we may know what the disjuncture is, but I am saying, even the colleague who responded on the DDM, you know, there's a plethora of legislation. It's there. We can all comply to that legislation. Coming now with the new DDM legislation, we are all going to comply with that legislation. But there are 2 spheres of government that are never held accountable when it comes to planning. Never held accountable. I last week sat in the Northwest in the Premier's Coordinating Council, and there was a specific section that looked at interprovincial infrastructure planning. All the HODs were there, just because the Premier summoned them. All the HODs were there. I, as SALGA, raised the question. I said, what's the point of you being here? When the IDP process was approved by the municipality in June, July, when the budget was approved by a municipality in June, July, when the SDPIP was also approved, done, completed, approved. Now you come with a human settlement program. 3,500 houses. Municipality is supposed to provide water. Municipality is supposed to provide sewer. Municipality is supposed to provide. No. The answer was no. We are doing bulk services. The issue is not about bulk services. The issue is about those bulk services. Into those bulk services runs water. Who reticulates water? It's the municipality. Was the municipality consulted on the 3,500 houses? No. The municipality was just consulted last week. And I said to them, MMs, if you are going to sit here and accept this disposition that is being showed here, I think we're all going to be responsible. When we ask municipalities to communicate, I think we've got this issue of communication, there's distrust, there's mistrust. We agree with all those processes, but where does it emanate from? Isn't it about this misalignment, non-integration from these other spheres of government that want to control this local sphere of government? When this local sphere of government fails, they then look at interventions. The very ones who are not supporting municipalities first look at intervention. And then they call it 139 Constitution, 139 MFMA. There are many 139s. We know all about them. Municipalities are blamed day in, day out. So I think the toolbox that we come up with should talk about the toolbox of all the work that SALGA has done, number one, integrate that work. The body of knowledge is there. But the toolbox should say, how do we hold everybody accountable, not only municipalities? I think municipalities are doing the best they can under very difficult situations. We must hold these other spheres of government, and that toolbox should come saying these are the things we want to do to hold these other spheres of government. And also civil society must be a very, very, very critical element within the toolbox to say, government, provincial and national, civil society is also your baby. It can't be municipal's baby. Because municipalities are now faced with coalitions. And it makes it extremely difficult to do this work. You can be an official sitting there, you are ineffective. But you are working very hard to make an IDP document look beautiful. But what is that beauty without it being implemented effectively? Then you have, and you are going to see, we are going to elections. People are going to toy every day. What are they toying about? About the very services we are talking about. So I'm just saying, let's try and be realistic about whatever toolbox we come up with to make it so interwoven that we are looking at all these spheres of government and the responsibility and link it back to Section 154 in terms of support by government. Because we are saying in terms of intervention, you are now saying you are intervening in terms of Section 139 of the Constitution, but the Constitution has got Section 154 that says, what have you done before you go and intervene? And you know who intervenes? It's EXCO. Who sits in EXCO is the very MEC of Public Works, Roads, Transport, who's not doing the roads. The very MEC of Human Settlements, who's now putting these things into a municipality. So I think we must find a way of saying the toolbox really needs to look at how do we then come, because we are all consistently going to sit here for years to come and will be judged very harsh by history. All of us. If we cannot get these things and hold government accountable at the other two levels, provincial and national, and say to them, we are coming up with a toolkit that involves you from the beginning. And say, how do we then implement this tool? Because as SALGA, we can take this toolkit, take it to the min-max wherever we are going, budget forums wherever we are going, and say, this is how we think the solution is going to come for us to be able to deliver services to our people. We are now confronted with load shedding. The municipalities are going to be blamed for load shedding, and they're already blamed for load shedding. It's only simple for us to say, no, it's ESCOM. But ESCOM, in its own way, it says, municipality, now it's 30 minutes after load shedding. No, the municipality is supposed to turn you on. You see, now they're taking the blame back to municipalities. I've heard it so often. So I'm just saying that all of us, we need to then say, how do we then enhance this toolkit, not to the level of the how, the what, but the level of who should be accountable and in what way should they be accountable and how do we hold them accountable? Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Quite expanding the accountability matrix and speaking to some of the national level advocacy that this project is ultimately also aiming towards. Thanks for that question and comment. Paul?
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to follow that. But I think I like it. And this tech discussion and this community engagement discussion reminds me of an incident I had a short while ago when I was able to renew my car license via the internet. You notice. And so it made me wonder, I don't think it's a solution problem that we have. It's whether these solutions fall on people who are ready to adopt and change, which takes me to the next point, is I think we've got a people problem, actually. And we've got to be people to behave differently. And that behavior change takes time and persistence to get the behavior to change. And I just also want to reflect on another opportunity which local government needs to identify. We did a scenario planning exercise in Makana municipality. Two issues were raised as critical: political will, which goes to your point to a large extent, and collaboration. The important thing was when these options, these 4 scenarios were stacked up, the second best scenario to be in is where you had political will. Even if you don't have community collaboration, the municipality has the agency and the authority to implement an enabling community environment properly for the types of things that we're trying to achieve. Because a lot of the work, and I refer to the Ahmad Katrada, and we've been involved with some of your work down at Makana with PSAM and stuff like that. And I always just wondered, with that work, and we say we're giving people agency, but do they really have agency if there's no municipality that's going to be responsive? It becomes a talk, becomes an idea place. It becomes and has the potential to become unruly and lawless because there isn't a responsive municipality. And so we've got to consider those things. So I think whilst doing the toolkit and all that, again, I just want to emphasize that the type of change that the lady was talking about up there, I think has to be about the people responsible at the top of these institutions to drive the cultural change that's required to be community-centric and to inclusive governance again. It really is important. I think we can do a lot of this stuff, and I think it was mentioned earlier this morning. The research was done 10 years ago. The same problems exist. We worked in Gauteng, Kokta on revenue management issues 20 years ago. Those same projects are still appearing. And the question is why? Because we're symptomatic in terms of our thinking and not targeting the real problem, which I think is the people. That doesn't mean that the toolboxes and all the initiatives, technology is not important, it's critical as well. But they go hand in hand. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Not to facilitate the question and answer too much, but I think, you know, you're raising another issue around the people component as the challenge. And when you speak about these issues kind of recurring year in, year out, and connecting it with what Sisters was saying was about these assumptions of the white paper, is there something about the way that local government or the context in which local government operates today that requires us to just go back a little bit and reconfigure ourselves and see if where those changes need to be made more structurally, as opposed to kind of these piecemeal efforts, whereas the legislative and enabling environment is not conducive. Sorry to facilitate, but I think I'll use that privilege as a facilitator. Eugene?
Can I sit
yes,
down?
you can sit.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I want to appreciate what everybody has contributed to the front. I think for me, I've been busy with colleagues at the office, just giving all your specific projects that you are doing. I must tell you is in Koga, 90% of what you are doing, we're not aware of. Probably it's because of ignorance, but we will definitely be linking up with you, all of you on that. I think one of the biggest thing for us, for me, is through the COMPACT project is that that support and the link for all the participants, the panelists, if we could just have a link where we can actually, you know, whatever they've communicated, so we can draw from that. I'm not going to dwell on what was already said. HSRC, I just need to say, Dr. Paul, Saturday while I was doing my political work in a political t-shirt, I was approached by your HSRC colleagues, you know, in Koga municipality, coming from the Nelson Mandela Metro to do research on voter education. And as the public participation manager, was actually a front, you know, felt that is incorrect. You know, we were not aware these things are happening. So it speaks again to that, and communities raise these matters. And I got lots of WhatsApps, and I actually had to drive to them and find out, guys, what are you doing? So it's something we need to talk about, in specifically linking it with your IT things that you do. I want to, there's a question that I had in terms of criteria for selecting, but I saw an action for accountability. They actually stipulate a selection criteria for selecting projects or participants in that. I was worried that one of the district development modules was speaking, and it's doing in Makana municipality, which is in Makanda, is one of the towns, and it's not through the DDM, because otherwise we would also be aware. And I think also for us that's important. You know, my personal view around the DDM is it doesn't matter. It's the political view in the municipality that I am. So and also the provincial government. I think the lady at the back just mentioned something about the other spheres of government, their involvement in this. I'll give you a practical example. I'm sitting on I'm actually on the red carpet because of a notice we got yesterday morning for a portfolio committee visit this morning on a housing project. And you unfortunately have to communicate that. And how does the public actually prepare themselves in the notice period to get to these things and participate in their own things? I think just maybe being tech savvy, Dr. Paul would have assisted us with that. The COCTA CDW one, I'm not even going to talk about that. But I think a link to the sector departments was also mentioned this morning as to their roundtables and availability with CDWs. The contestation between CDWs and councillors, it's well documented, but it's not managed, in terms of administratively from the HODs. The thing I want to get to is the funding modules for digitalization. And that's one of our key objectives in our municipality, digitalization. And we're trying to optimize our own apps, getting our own things going. Is there sort of specifically linked to public participation where there are already things that are being used that we could not invent the wheel, go on that, because we've actually combined our ICT and communications department as a communications digital section to actually enhance that. There is meeting fatigue. Members of communities don't want to come to meetings. They want to sit in the comfort of their homes and use Netflix apps that they can actually comment on things that is important to them. Yeah. So I'm very interested in interactive tools, the two-way zero-rated data cost and the civic tech awareness, that is evidence-informed submissions. My colleagues here from the IDP department, the strategic section, knows that communities always ask after IDP sessions, how is my comments, how is my inputs, how is it filtered into the actual IDP, into the actual budget, approved budget. They don't see that, and we want to project it. There's a measurable or a tool that can actually see of these comments that went through how it's gone there. So I'm really interested in the apps, Let's Talk, or those other things, specifically with public participation. I think we've exhausted. Myself, having been a public representative before, we've exhausted the thing of meetings, just meetings. We have church meetings, we have political meetings, and all these meetings. People are tired of meetings. They want to sit and use smartphones and do that. But I must say, Rebecca, just in conclusion, I think the panel discussion, and even what Colin was saying, is what is done, the depth of that definitely must be a rock bedding for what the COMPACT is trying to achieve. And I'm positive in terms of the tools that we'll be creating. I know some of us said the tools were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I am an optimist. Even if we are behind 50-0 and there's 5 minutes left, the Springboks versus the All Blacks, I still believe we can win it. So thank you very much for the panelists for their presentations.
Thanks, Eugene, for those reflections. Final question from Lindiwe, and then I think there's one question on the virtual platform. And then in terms of responses, I think the questions weren't necessarily directed at anyone in particular, but we'll deal with that when we come to the answers. Thanks, Lindiwe.
Thanks. Fortunately, it's not a question. It's a comment, and it was going to be short, but it will also not be long. And I think I'm convinced more than ever that we should just get people out of this whole thing. ChatGPT, all the tools that we have, take the people out. They're very complicated human beings. To your presentation, well, first of all, I think this session is very useful for us in light of the next session, but in light of the entire project, in that it's good to know that a lot has been done. And so we don't have to start from scratch with the tools. And I'm hoping Hannah, who is joining us online, is also taking note of the fact that we're not starting from scratch, but we are looking at what exists, what are the gaps, and how can they be best used and implemented in the 12 sites. And we promise that we will run some of these tools and pilot them over 2 IDP cycles to see if they work. So I think we have an opportunity in that, and the organizations that are represented can also learn from us. But I think we are going to take a lot from what you are currently doing. So in terms of what we are talking about and the work that you're doing in Joburg and the sites in Joburg, and you wanting to see, now that the city has committed on paper what it is they're doing in public participation, I can also tell you that for another project, when we contacted the city to look at their public participation records, we were referred to a consulting firm that sits in Observatory, Johannesburg, my area, that does this. And when we engaged more with this online, we realized that that particular company requires people to register online in order for them to participate in processes. I think they're doing a lot of the city's public participation processes. So already you can see there's a problem there because there's an over-reliance on accessibility to a platform, and then you have to register, and then only then you can have your voice heard, which kind of defeats the purpose that we are trying to build here. That's all I was going to say, but until the lady at the back spoke very passionately about what's wrong with the system, I think there is something wrong that we are still talking about the white paper on local government, which is a very good piece of work that laid the groundwork for all of the legislation that came. I mean, the suite of legislation in local government that we use today came in there. But I think if my math is correct, that was about 25 years ago. So the fact that nothing else has happened, not that work has not been done, because some of us who've done work, Nishandra, you'll know that we've done some work towards the review of the white paper, and it kind of like sat at COCTA somewhere. I think it's gathering dust. There is something wrong with the bigger system. The feedback loop of implementing policy, gaining experience and fixing that in policy, that's what's gone wrong. That's what's gotten broken, I think, in the local government system. I mean, we can talk about the history of it and what's happened, the high turnover of political office bearers in COCTA has contributed to that. We can talk about that, but the fact of the matter is that the system got broken somewhere, and the issues that you're raising are not going to be solved by a toolbox. The system of intergovernmental planning in South Africa has really not taken shape, and that's where the problem is. Because truly speaking, a single department, sector department, cannot be in all of the IDP planning processes at the same time. That alone should make us sit back and say, hang on, what's wrong with the system? How can we best do it? Otherwise, we'll keep saying it. We said it many years ago that sector departments do not participate in IDP processes. They can't be there in all of them at the same time, you know? So let's go back and say, how then do we do this? How do we maximize the fact that the planning process for local government is actually different from national and provincial government? But I do agree with every other sentiment about holding them accountable in terms of section 54 or 56 of the Constitution, because before you can intervene as a provincial and national government, you need to have supported first. And what we've seen with all of these interventions is that the support has not been there, but the intervention follows. And the municipality becomes worse off than it was, which also defeats the purpose, because if you intervene to improve. But actually part of the crisis has been created by the Section 39 interventions that have not been well thought of. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindiwe, for those reflections. Also echoing some of the sentiments that came through earlier. One question on the virtual platform, and then we'll hand over to our panel for a very quick overview response.
No, thank you, Rebecca. We only have one question from Catherine. She's saying, thank you to all the panelists. I would like to challenge the panelists to reflect on the question, public participation for what? Often we think of public participation as a format for communities to feed into plans. However, in my own research, where I ask communities in low-income neighborhood when and how they would like to participate, they emphasize that they mainly see their role in actually working on projects, besides being consulted and giving inputs into IDPs and other platforms. I think we should consider more that empowerment also happens through other channels than discussing and consulting. I would be curious to hear the panelists' thoughts on that. That's it.
Thank you, Catherine, for your question. Just to maybe respond, the context of COMPACT was also limited by the problem statement that we were trying to address, which was particularly related to IDP. And I think we note that, public participation occurs at various levels for different projects, different processes, but perhaps our panelists can also reflect on that. I will hand over. I think if we can just get 2 quick responses from the panelists, and just as a high-level overview, kind of snapshot response to what has come from the engagement from the floor. So if we can start with Colin very quickly.
Yeah, thank you. Let me take on the last question, public participation for what? I think what we've been saying, that public participation must be meaningful and impactful in people's lives. Whatever they talk about, they must be able to see the results, their lives changing for the better, which is still a challenge. There are various situations where things that people participate on, like in the various units. I mentioned those that are involved in let's say community development, those NGOs, they participate for a particular purpose. We have other participation in areas like your agriculture in municipalities. There are beneficiaries. You see, there is this mixed areas of public participation in space. We know that now young people are participating because others are getting bursaries, others are getting EPWP. It's not enough, but it's something that is actually happening in the space. And my last take would be, after this session, maybe to my SALGA colleagues and PARI and in the Integrity Action, you should consider already developing a proposal that will plug in from where this one will end, because our weakness is that we come up with short kind of support project. They are done. When their phase ends, we end there and then we forget about them. But we are now anticipating that there might need to be additional work done beyond this. And the question is, what are we doing? As I propose that we should start now working on something that will be plugging on, so that we don't leave this as a piece after its funding has ended, after its term, after 4 years it has ended. The question is, what do we do after 4 years? I think, let me put it like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel would like to come through? Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, just to respond to, I think the point that was being made by the lady in the back about, well, at least the point of departure around the white paper and the design there. I think it's quite important to recognize that, like, the Constitution, like, resulted in a kind of big bang set of reforms that were tried to balance 2 particular things. One was like public management reforms, which were mainly kind of top down in nature, like you'd see in the MFMA and so on, together with the bottom up developmentalist reforms that you see in much of the Systems Act around public participation and performance management systems, and bottom-up driven approaches. And both those approaches are legitimate and needed. And what we need to be able to, as the civil society or different actors, be able to navigate both of those things, to be able to utilize, to kind of use the bottom-up mobilizing environment to engage with the top-down authorizing environment. And that's actually where change happens. And I think that it's quite important that we develop the tools and toolkits to be able to navigate that space. And I completely agree with you that much of the failings of our local government system right now has been largely because the institutional capability of supporting it, the role that needed to be played by national and provincial government in a devolving system to be able to support local municipalities has been wanting. And it's about developing that toolkit and that set of capabilities as well that is quite critically important. 2 toolkits that I must mention, but that speak to the point that one of the people were asking for around, from COCA, around digital and around practice there. So the one toolkit that I'd like to draw your reference to is the Intact toolkit. Still available. It was developed by National Treasury CSP. It's for integrity, accountability, and transparency using technology. And it's a web-based platform that has a number of tools and best practices and so on around social accountability and uses of technology. And there are many others. There's an open data toolkit in there, and there's a range of best practices around social accountability in that. And then the second one is the one that we as the EDP are going to be launching, which is a partnering platform and toolkit, and that should be out in the next in the next few weeks. It's a way of strengthening partnering capability, particularly of government, to be able to work with other social actors, both the private sector, civil society, as well as intergovernmentally, working with national and provincial government. And it's a collaboration toolkit. So please look out for both of those two. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Nashedra. Yanis, in 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay,
1
let's
minute,
go.
please.
If we fail, I think we fail as a collective. And I think that's the one mindset shift that we have to make. You know, even as a civil society organization, we're part of the system. And, you know, it's not about local, and local government really carries the brunt of service delivery failures. But we fail as a collective, which comes to the point about, you know, one of these days there's going to be a court ruling that's going to say, you cannot, if somebody challenges 139, there's a court that's going to ask the question, what has happened in terms of 154? Prove to us that you have fulfilled your 154 obligations before you go and implement a 139. And I think that's going to be an eye-opener. The white paper was always premised on the basis that we will collect 95% of revenue from citizens, and then the equitable share will top up. That is, South African society now finds itself at a point with so much of unemployment and poverty that is simply, there's a complete mismatch as far as that is concerned. And on the question that came online on you know, public participation for what, I think you have to empathize with residents when you call up a public meeting. If they are unemployed, right, and struggling to put food on the table, they will attend that meeting with one primary objective: is there any way that this is going to solve my problem? And that's just the way life works. So they will come there wanting to know, is there a project and is there some role for me in the project? And I think you have to face that reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanis. Paul,
Also
half a
be
minute
1
for
minute.
you.
Half. Guess less. No, I've forgotten what I was going to comment on. I think the one thing I just want, oh, sorry, Catherine's comment, I think it's Catherine on the virtual, just, yeah, I think mentioning a project, working on, people wanting to work on projects, I think that's what one of the interests I suppose personally had in some of the civic education type work with young people and using data to develop project proposals for an IDP consultation, was that it is framed around a project, and I'm sure the colleagues here would have a better sense of how viable those kinds of approaches are, but a project-based approach does seem more attractive to young people on these kinds of things. The other was just around the people problem versus the role, you know, technology and it being a people problem ultimately. And I'm honestly, I'm a technology skeptic. It might be hard to believe, but I think I've come to feel or realize that there's a real aspirational element to technology, especially around young public officials, deputy directors, etc. That are, there's something about technology and its potential that is aspirational, interesting, and kind of takes them outside of their normal space, like that space that they feel trapped in, I think, sometimes. So I think it's, as much as there's some realities around technology use, there's also that kind of sense that there's something there that can stimulate change for me and personally, or else in their environment that they're working in, which is interesting.
Great, thank you so much.
So I trust online is there sorted. Yeah, online is it? Yeah. Oh, we're back. Thanks, Louise. So, okay, so the session today is about the toolbox, and we've heard a lot about the toolbox, and we've got a lot of ideas that is coming through. There's some quiet voices around here, and so let's get into hearing what those quiet voices are saying. So, but before I do that, just let me give you a glimpse of my thinking around toolbox. So we start off with the whole essence of public participation, and we think that engagement is really, really important in this place. Then to encourage all stakeholders to participate, we need to incorporate them. We need to evaluate the process that we go through, and we also need to educate them. So I think this encompasses a lot in terms of public participation in many ways, and a good tool to think of. Next slide, please. So toolbox, I'm not going to dwell too much on my slides, to determine appropriate tools to support, and already we have a host of tools that we should be thinking of in this way. One important point I want to make here is that one tool cannot fix all. Impossible. And we've heard that, you know. So we need to peg at different levels of our stakeholders what type of tools is relevant for that specific stakeholder or specific environment. Necessary to support all relevant stakeholders, and that is community, political bearers, and administration. And the aim then is to deepen the democracy, meaning that there should be equal participation, there should be accountability, there should be transparency in the process. Thank you, sir. Why a toolbox? I think the discussion, the panel discussions, the approaches which Kate made already talks to why a toolbox. And I think I had a sense that people were really on top of why we need a toolbox in this way. And there were some encouraging voices earlier on in terms of a toolbox and its usage. Next slide, please. I'm deliberately going fast here. Possible tools, well, this is a good one, that performance management is really a tool that we really need to look at. And this was our thinking before engaging. So this was our thoughts when we started looking at results coming through and so forth. And you can see very much aligned to Kate's presentation. Effective collaboration, very important. Advocacy or promotion of ideas, IDP planning. And this is interesting. National Treasury has developed a Go Muni tool and full of financial information. And for especially communities to engage with this tool in order to find the right facts before coming to the table when they're collaborating. So I think that, for me, is key. Women and youth participation, ward committee, capacity building. We heard a lot from Kate in terms of that. So these are actually replication of Kate's findings, IDP public participation processes, what came out of the action research, ward committees. We heard a lot about ward committees. Next slide, please. Communication, Kate couldn't emphasize more about communication really being a struggle. How do we find this appropriate tool to work with communications at different levels and so forth? Performance management, operational planning is important. So here, in order to hear your voices, I'm suggesting that we gather, and if you are one on the table or two, turn your seats around and join another table, please. There are cards. I've left some cards on your table. With that, then, thank you very much for your contributions. It will help us think through some of the tools that we need to develop and get going. Obviously, this is as we progress into our next phase of engaging with the communities and the CSOs and the CBOs. We'll have these thoughts in our mind, how best to start to develop these tools. So are there any suggestions online?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tabiso Paririnyatwa, Program Coordinator for the COMPACT program at PARI. As Girish said, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because the TORs were circulated to everybody. And I think the idea is it's a draft document, and the discussion now is going to help shape the final document and how we want this reference committee to look like. Just to give you some context about the committees that we have currently for COMPACT, we have 2 committees. The first one is the executive committee, which consists of, you can go to the next slide. Oh, I didn't put it down, but it consists of the executive members from Integrity Action, from PARI, and from SALGA, together with the program leads from each of those organizations. So Winnie, Girish, and Hannah. The second committee is the program steering committee, which is made up of the core team that you see here at COMPACT, as well as provincial SALGA members. And this is the team that is also known as the operational team, which has facilitated all the, facilitated the action research that we did last year. So now we want to form what is known as the reference committee. And I think today's session has been, has really proven to have very rich discussions, good inputs from everybody. The panel this morning was fantastic. And this is the kind of discussion we want to keep going. I think we want to streamline or continue these discussions on a regular basis to, shape the program and how, to manage the knowledge that we have internally. And to do that, I think we need all of the wonderful wisdom in the room. And we need, some volunteers to be part of this research committee. All of the slides that are here, you'll see in the terms of reference that I circulated. Like I mentioned, it is a draft document. We would like you to have a look at it, give us your input, let us know what works, what doesn't work. These are the main objectives of the reference committee that we want to form. We want to advise relevant stakeholders in developing the sustainability plan for the COMPACT program. Coordinate, and the committee will coordinate and cooperate whenever relevant with other stakeholders on topics and initiatives related to the outcomes of COMPACT. And within that committee, we can establish sub-working groups with specific terms of reference to address any areas of special interest within the group. So what we were thinking in terms of the composition of the committee is, I think it's not limited to the people that are here, but this is just some ideas of how we were thinking it would work out. The ideas for, if you've got any other ideas of stakeholders you think would provide meaningful contribution to the committee, please do let us know. But otherwise, we would obviously have the executive and the steering committee, representation from the EU, some representation from Treasury, DPME, COGTA, civil society organizations, and obviously staff members from the 3 implementing partners, and any other identified stakeholders that come up from this session. The idea is to try and meet twice a year, depending on, people's availability, obviously, but it'll be good, I think, to sit down and have discussions like this every 6 months, if possible. And the quorum for the session would be half of the committee members for it to be deemed meeting. So this is the part where you raise your hand and show enthusiasm and say, yes, pick me, I want to be part of the reference. I know Eugenius has already expressed interest in the reference committee. So please do get in touch, let us know, and let's see how best we can do this. Thank you.